Chapter 1807. The hammer smashed viciously into Zhou Wu's chest. It was suffocating, so suffocating that he couldn't breathe. The divine arbiter's face was pale, but even so, she smiled brightly. The radiance of motherly love radiated from her. When she learned that the child in her womb was safe, the divine arbiter no longer cared whether she lived or died. The instant Su Yin announced the divine arbiter's fate, Zhou Wu's heart filled with mixed emotions. His eyes met the divine arbiter's. His eyes reddened involuntarily, and they burned with rage. What the hell was he doing? Zhou Wu questioned himself over and over again. If only he'd admitted earlier that the divine arbiter was in his heart. No matter what she'd done to him, his love for her hadn't changed in the slightest. Why had he attacked her? Just why? No, impossible. Zhou Wu unleashed a berserk aura. Wu Di and Gu Li, who stood in his way, were blown back several steps by the wind. Then, Zhou Wu took a step forward. Wu Di and Gu Li tried to block him, but the enraged Zhou Wu reached forward, grabbed them by the collar, and tossed them several hundred meters away. Then Zhou Wu transformed into a blur as he viciously grabbed Su Yan's collar. Say what you just said one more time. Let go. Su Yan forcefully slapped Zhou Wu's thick arm. When Xiao Yumei saw this, a belt appeared in her hand, but before she could, scram, bang, bang, a beam of light shot out, colliding with it. Xiao Yumei was flung several dozen meters back. She tasted something sweet in her throat, then coughed up a mouthful of blood, staining her lips crimson. Zhou Wu, cried the divine arbiter, paralyzed on the ground. Zhou Wu stared intently at Su Yan. Tell me. Xiao Yumei, Wu Di, and Gu Li hurried back. Zhou Wu's furious attack had injured them all, but none of them were life-threatening. Su Yan watched everything unfold. After relaxing a little, she stopped struggling and snorted. Do you even need to ask me? Don't you know? Even an imperial monarch would be heavily injured if they were to defend against it with all their might. Just now, the divine arbiter didn't use any spiritual power to strengthen her wounds. She relied solely on her physical body to take your attack. Her heart and lungs are badly injured, and her heart is worse. It is the place with the densest meridians of the human race. If all of them are destroyed, no one will be able to save her. Impossible. The violent spiritual power stirred up the sand and stones, and the surging spiritual power turned into a gale that made it difficult for people to breathe. Gu Li teleported to the divine arbiter's side and helped her block Zhou Wu's furious spiritual energy. Aren't you the life chief god? Save her. If I could save him, I would save him even if you didn't ask. Su Yin glanced at the divine arbiter, her eyes filled with grief. From her point of view, all of this was not worth it. For a person like Zhou Wu, they were risking their lives just to keep their child. Too stupid. Somehow, she could understand. Perhaps this was what women were like. Perhaps this was his mother. I don't believe it. I order you to save her. If she dies... Zhou Wu grabbed Su Yan by the neck, so hard his veins bulged. You'll die too. Zhou Wu, Lil Yan, Wu Di, and Gu Li forced themselves to flee to Zhou Wu's side. They wanted to save Su Yan. However, even in their complete forms, they still wouldn't be a match for Zhou Wu. Given their injuries, how could they possibly snatch Su Yan away from him? Get the hell out of my way. Boom! Two beams of air slammed into Wu Di and Gu Li, sending them flying several hundred meters back. Zhou Wu, shouted the divine arbiter as hard as she could, but Zhou Wu acted as if he hadn't heard her at all. He kept his grip on Su Yan's neck. Not long after, Su Yan's face flushed red, and the frequency of her struggles gradually slowed down. Zhou Wu, let her go, screamed the divine arbiter. Can't you listen to me just once before I die? Bang! Su Yan, who was grabbed by Zhou Wu, suddenly fell to the ground. Zhou Wu was like a wooden man, still maintaining his previous actions. Turn around and look at me, pleaded the divine arbiter. Zhou Wu turned around, his entire body stiff. Two streams of tears streamed down his cheeks. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he calmly stared at the divine arbiter for a few seconds. Then He plopped down in front of her and slapped himself repeatedly. "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." "I don't blame you," said the divine arbiter. She gently grasped Zhou Wu's hand, but he remained seated in front of her, his head bowed. "I killed your clansman too. I'm such a beast." "I don't blame you," said the divine arbiter with a gentle smile. She struggled to lift her hand to wipe away Zhou Wu's tears, but perhaps because she was too weak, she couldn't even lift her hand. Zhou Wu hurriedly grabbed her hand and placed it on his face. The divine arbiter stroked his cheek as she wished. "Before I came here, I paid my respects to my clansmen, then betrayed them, because I told them that I was willing to share this sin with you. Now that I think about it, I'm an unfilial daughter." A sorrowful smile spread across the divine arbiter's face. Su Yin, Gu Li, Xiao Yumei, and Wu Di gathered together. None of them said anything to disturb them. Instead, they silently watched the divine arbiter and Zhou Wu. "What a foolish woman." Xiao Yumei couldn't help but sigh. "You say she's foolish, but it's not like we aren't either." Suddenly, Su Yin glanced at Yi Zichen. Xiao Yumei noticed this and nodded wryly, then grabbed Su Yan's hand. In truth, women were truly pitiful at times. When they truly met the love of their hearts, they were willing to give up everything for that person. "Divine arbiter, don't say it. Let me say it. I might not have much time left, so just give me the rest, okay?" The divine arbiter looked weakly at Zhou Wu and smiled. "In truth, I do have a place in your heart, right?" Zhou Wu nodded forcefully, tears streaming down his cheeks. When she heard this, the divine arbiter's eyes finally lit up with happiness. "I knew it. You're blaming me for hiding the fact that Yi Zichen is the master of the stars, right? That's not important." "It's not important at all." Zhou Wu shook his head. By now, he no longer cared who the master of the stars was. All he wanted was for the divine arbiter to live, and to live well. "Do you know why I lied to you?" "Don't say it. Just lie there obediently. I'll find a way to save you." "Because you scare me back then. You were too obsessed with transcending." "In truth, transcending isn't that important, is it? You're already at the peak of this world. Why do you still want to pursue some illusory realm? I just want you to be well, and to be your wife and child. I'm begging you, stop talking." Zhou Wu could clearly sense the divine arbiter's life slipping away. He wanted to hug her tightly, but he was worried that it would affect her wounds. For some reason, a sense of helplessness filled his heart. Only then did he realize that even if he transcended, there was nothing he could do about it. The person he loved was lying in front of him, but there was nothing he could do to make her better. "I might as well leave you a child that belongs to you and me." Screech. Chapter 1808. The Clown. The sudden appearance of the clown caused Xiao Yumei and the others to knit their brows. For some reason, even though they'd never seen him before, they all felt like he was from the outside. Little did they know, when Zhou Wu saw him, his eyes lit up with hope after a brief moment of shock. "Artist, great artist, you came just in time. I beg you, save her." Zhou Wu's eyes were filled with pleading. Then he knelt before the clown. His kneeling shocked Gu Li and the others. As far as they knew, they'd never seen Zhou Wu kneel to anyone before. For the divine arbiter, he was willing to give up his most cherished dignity. The visual impact left Xiao Yumei and the others dumbfounded. But more than anything, they felt regret. If only he'd known this would happen. If he hadn't unleashed that fatal attack on the divine arbiter, he wouldn't have ended up like this. "Your Excellency, I beg you, please save her. In this world, only you." "Let me see." He beckoned with his finger, and the divine arbiter floated up to him. "Oh, you actually have a child in your belly." "Yes, Your Excellency. But this child isn't important. I beg you, please save the divine arbiter," Zhou Wu begged bitterly. "She's very important to you." "Yes, very important. More important than anything else." "So that's how it is." The divine arbiter nodded in understanding. Her hand flickered with light as she brushed it against the divine arbiter's head. Zhou Wu's eyes brimmed with hope as he knelt piously, waiting for the divine arbiter to be saved. Since she's so important, the price is naturally much higher. "What do you want to trade for her?" Zhou Wu, who was kneeling on the ground, was stunned. That's right. He'd almost forgotten that in order to get what he wanted from the Divine Arbiter, he had to offer a corresponding bargaining chip. Ordinary items couldn't satisfy the Divine Arbiter, but he'd traded his heart in the time corridor. He'd traded his soul in order to transcend. Two of humanity's most important commodities were now being used as bargaining chips. He really didn't know what to trade for them. No. And suddenly, a bargaining chip of equal value appeared in Zhou Wu's mind. Back when Zhou Wu had traded the heart and soul, he had not hesitated at all. But now, when he thought of this bargaining chip, he could not make a decision. He couldn't bear to. He gritted his teeth and unclenched his fists several times. From his body movements, it could be seen how much he was struggling and suffering in his heart. Then he saw the Divine Arbiter's pale face. He saw that she was on the verge of closing her eyes, but she still struggled to look into his eyes. Memories flashed through Zhou Wu's mind. After a long while, he seemed to make up his mind. Your Majesty, can you really save her? The great artist can naturally do it, as long as you can give the corresponding bargaining chips. But I don't think you have anything else to exchange. It laughed. Yes, I have it. Zhou Wu gnashed his teeth so hard that his muscles trembled. I'll use my memories with the Divine Arbiter as an exchange. I'll use all my memories of her to exchange for a new life for her. Xiao Yumei and the others were dumbfounded. Using memories to exchange for it? Some people would say that it was their lives, while others would say that it was their wealth. But in reality, the most important and valuable thing for humans was their memories, especially those blissful memories. Their lives would eventually come to an end, and they would no longer be able to use their wealth. When they grew old, they would lie in bed, unable to move, and could only passively wait for their lives to come to an end. When they were alone, in the darkness, with no one to accompany them, only their memories accompanied them as they walked forward. When the Divine Arbiter heard this, she trembled, then began to scream like a madwoman. No, don't. Shut up, little one. The Divine Arbiter gently patted the Divine Arbiter's head, and she fell into a deep slumber. Then it looked at Zhou Wu with admiration. You're amazing. Your memories with her? All right, I approve of this bargaining chip. The Divine Arbiter dragged the Divine Arbiter down to Zhou Wu. Her comical clown face split into a wide grin, and she gently patted Zhou Wu's head. I'm taking this bargaining chip. Wonderful. Zhou Wu let out a long sigh, a wide smile on his face. However, as he smiled, tears streamed down his cheeks. He knew that, before long, his memories with the Divine Arbiter would vanish from his mind. He couldn't struggle. He could only use these last few seconds to see their past. In just a few breaths, the Divine Arbiter retracted her hand from Zhou Wu's head, revealing an elite ball of light in her palm. This ball contained all of Zhou Wu's and the Divine Arbiter's memories. Wake up. With a soft call, Zhou Wu opened his eyes. Her Majesty, why are you here? Zhou Wu's eyes were filled with shock. At the same time, he glanced at the Divine Arbiter. Although he was curious about this stranger, he didn't dare ask too many questions in front of the Divine Arbiter. But for some reason, he couldn't stop himself from looking at the Divine Arbiter. Was it because she was too beautiful? The Divine Arbiter was indeed beautiful. She could even be described as breathtakingly beautiful. Even as a god emperor, Zhou Wu had never seen such a beauty before. But she belonged to the Divine Arbiter. No matter how attractive she was, he couldn't look at her for too long. If the Divine Arbiter found out, he'd be in deep trouble. However, he felt the corners of his eyes moisten. He touched them to see if there were any tears that hadn't dried up yet. Crying? He was a mighty god emperor. How could he cry? Were they tears of excitement after transcending? This was too embarrassing, and he'd done it in front of the Divine Arbiter. Her Majesty, I'm truly sorry. I might have lost my composure just now. It's fine. I understand. The Divine Arbiter laughed. This, Xiao Yumei and the others froze. They'd never imagined that a technique like this existed that could completely strip a person's memories. Zhou Wu no longer had any recollection of the Divine Arbiter. This was it was too shocking. Her Majesty, what brings you here? Asked Zhou Wu. Your efficiency is too slow. so I came over to see if you're slacking off. The Divine Arbiter patted Zhou Wu on the shoulder. Don't disappoint me. Hurry up and destroy this era. That way, I can take you to a world that will truly bring you joy. I've troubled you, Her Majesty. I really did run into some troublesome fellows. Chapter 1809. After waking up, Zhou Wu didn't mention anything about saving the Divine Arbiter. It was as if none of this had ever happened, as if the Divine Arbiter had never appeared in their memories. Their memories were completely stripped away, leaving behind only endless slaughter. That fellow is really not bad. The Freedom God King smiled contentedly. He never imagined that the Divine Arbiter's influence on Zhou Wu would be so great that he could no longer draw his sword. Fortunately, she'd arrived in time and stripped Zhou Wu and the Divine Arbiter of their memories. Zhou Wu, who had lost his memories, left behind only endless loneliness and a desire to kill. They hadn't wasted too much time. So long as Zhou Wu was fast enough, he might be able to finish them off before Yi Zichen succeeded. Looks like everything is coming to an end. The Freedom Divine King laughed mockingly. This laughter was naturally directed at East Emperor. It was rare that the demon Arch-East Emperor didn't give any reply. Naturally, the Freedom Divine King would think that the situation was beyond the demon Thearcha's expectations. He didn't expect things to turn out this way. This also proved that the Great Era no longer had any backup plans. Yi Zichen, he would definitely die. He forgot everything. Wu Di couldn't help but mutter to himself as he circled around. From the Divine Arbiter's appearance, to Zhou Wu's determination to attack her, to the point where Zhou Wu was willing to give up their most precious memories to save her. The time was very short, but the words of life and death were deeply imprinted in everyone's hearts. Now that Zhou Wu had completely forgotten about them and returned to being a killing machine, they couldn't help but sigh. Especially Xiao Yumei and Su Yin, they felt sorry for them. He looked at the Divine Arbiter and saw that it was still holding the sleeping Divine Arbiter. As the goddess of life, Su Yin could clearly sense the Divine Arbiter's life force draining away. She wasn't the only one. The fetus within her was weakening as well. She swore that her mother would save her, but it didn't mean to save her at all. Zhou Wu has been tricked. Anyone can see that he has been tricked. Guli took a deep breath. His memories have been stripped away. When he wakes up, he won't have any memories of anything. Whether or not the clown would save the Divine Arbiter was up to him. It could be said that this was a test of credibility. Yes, he also thought of this, but he had no choice but to gamble. In the end, he was deceived. Xiao Yumei said, "Is this the end of the Divine Arbiter and her child?" Su Yin was a little sad. She risked her life to keep that child. If it wasn't for the sake of keeping her, she could have definitely survived. Everyone was indifferent. When the situation turned out like this, it was also something they did not want to see. They didn't know her limits, so taking the Divine Arbiter back from her was even more impossible. Ignoring the fact that their relationship with the Divine Arbiter wasn't that bad, even if they really wanted to steal it, there was no way Zhou Wu would ask them to consider its mother. All they could do now was feel sorry for the Divine Arbiter. I think it's better for everyone to put away their bemoaning feelings. Right now, before Gu Li could even finish speaking, a terrifying blade of light appeared in front of them. When the saber light swept past, the surrounding space was cut open. The pitch-black void was exposed without any cover. We're in a bad situation now. Bang! The saber light slammed into the ground, leaving a massive mark on the floating divine mountain. Gu Li and the others dodged in panic, narrowly avoiding Zhou Wu's attack. Just as they were about to gather their spiritual energy, they discovered that Zhou Wu was no longer paying them any attention. Instead, he was flying straight for Yi Zichen. Damn it, why aren't those little fairies done yet? Gu Li leaped into the air and rushed to Yi Zichen's side as fast as he could. His long hair grew so long that it practically trailed the ground. At the same time, his entire body swelled several times in size. His blood essence boiled, and the veins on his face crawled up his face, making him look like a vicious beast. Whoosh! He transformed into a gust of wind, streaking through the black curtain of shattered space like a shooting star. In the blink of an eye, He arrived 200 meters away from Yizichin. Then he slapped the ground with both hands, and a pitch-black shield appeared in front of him. Defend. In the end, Guli didn't use the power of the Emperor's Star. He seemed to have fused with the shield, as if they were connected by blood. He infused all of his spiritual energy into the shield, causing it to shimmer like a black gem. You think you have what it takes to stop me? Suddenly, the ferocious-looking Zhou Wu suddenly became more than 1,000 feet tall. As he ran, the entire divine mountain trembled. He lifted his right foot high into the air. Roar! Zhou Wu, who'd transformed into a giant, suddenly let out an anguished wail. Then everyone saw that Wu Di had appeared at his neck at some point. He gripped the hilt of his broken sword. As for the sword, no surprise. You damned ant! A berserk aura erupted from Zhou Wu's body. Wu Di flew into the air, clutching the hilt of his sword with great difficulty. However, Zhou Wu's aura was steaming hot. Wu Di couldn't help but howl in pain as his skin burned. He subconsciously loosened his grip, sending Wu Di flying several hundred meters away. Now that he'd dealt with the problem at his neck, Zhou Wu's eyes were still filled with pain. The broken sword was still embedded in his neck. However, he had no time to worry about that. He raised his right foot high and stomped down viciously on Gu Li's shield. Thud! When the shield collided with Zhou Wu's foot, a trembling ripple appeared in the space around them. Gu Li struggled bitterly to hold on. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but Zhou Wu's foot continued to stomp down. Xiao Yumei and Su Yan's attacks were completely ignored by Zhou Wu. For some reason, it seemed as if he only cared about dealing with Yizichin. You should have done this from the start. You had to be branded by the mighty divine arbiter to make you listen. As soon as she finished speaking, she glanced at the divine arbiter. So you're the one who delayed the appearance of my artwork? You're really annoying. Crack! He pressed his hand against the divine arbiter's skull. The dent was clearly visible. Divine arbiter! Su Yan, who'd been paying close attention to the divine arbiter, cried out involuntarily. Xiao Yumei looked over and saw Zhou Wu toss the divine arbiter into the air like a piece of trash. His spiritual energy surged and caught the falling divine arbiter. They're all dead. Chapter 1810. Although they hadn't interacted much, the divine arbiter had left a deep impression in Su Yan's mind. She watched as she died a miserable death at the divine arbiter's hands. The child she'd risked her life to save also died. Su Yan felt as if someone were squeezing her heart, making it hard for her to breathe. Su Yan clenched her fists and gnashed her teeth. As if sensing Su Yan's gaze, the divine arbiter subconsciously glanced in her direction. In truth, in its eyes, all living beings of the first era were nothing more than ants. It had no interest in paying attention to ants' rage. If it had the time, it'd rather focus on creating art. However, Su Yan gave it a special feeling. From her, they smelled the scent of the divine spark of life. I never would have guessed there'd be such a pleasant surprise. Little fellow, I'm very interested in you. Come with me. The divine arbiter instantly landed in front of Su Yan, then gently pressed its palm against her shoulder. The instant its hand touched Su Yan, she felt her entire body stiffen. Her divine power congealed, and she couldn't use it. Lilian, Little Master's wife, Xiao Yumei and Wu Di, who'd just returned, cried out in alarm. Gu Li, who'd been fighting Zhou Wu, also looked up. Damn it. Gu Li had no time to worry about Su Yan. He was already kneeling on one knee. His entire body was curled up from the pressure. Forget about trying to help Su Yan. He was afraid he couldn't even protect himself. At that moment, a beam of golden light flashed past his eyes. As soon as it appeared, he felt the pressure on his body vanish. Profound truths of lightning. Heavenly dragon roars. As the divine arbiter muttered to himself, the sky crackled with lightning. A purple-red lightning dragon descended from the heavens, roaring. The divine arbiter's eyes narrowed. Its left hand formed a seal. Bang! The divine arbiter felt a sudden kick to the chest. It didn't even know where the kick had come from. By the time it came to its senses, the lightning dragon had already descended. Su Yan's arm had been kicked away, and the divine arbiter was sent tumbling back to where the lightning dragon had landed. "How dare you touch my woman?" Su Yan, whose entire body was stiff, suddenly felt as though she had fallen into a warm embrace. The familiar smell made Su Yan's eyes flash with joy. She raised her head and saw a sharp face, as well as a pair of cold eyes looking at her. "You touched it with your right hand, right? Don't use this hand anymore." Wind profound, slaughtering blade. A wind blade that was more than 100 feet long condensed in the void. Under the baptism of the lightning dragon, the wind blade followed closely behind and accurately landed on its right wrist. However, the expected broken wrist did not appear. The wind blade directly pierced through its wrist and disappeared from the void. At this time, it had also broken free from the thunder, and its body seemed to be real and illusory. Psyche body. With a light smile, the person carrying Su Yin turned around and hooked his finger in the direction of Xiao Hu. Xiao Hu had been taking care of Xiao Yin and the others, but he was also worried about the situation. He felt himself being lifted into the air uncontrollably, as did Xiao Yin and the others. In the blink of an eye, they all landed next to Su Yin. He placed Su Yin safely in the air, then walked over to Xiao Yin and the others. "You've worked hard." He brushed his hand across Xiao Yin, Yin Shang, and Go Yuzhan's chests. Instantly, a fiery brand appeared on their chests. The appearance of this brand caused the expressions of those who were on the verge of death to relax. Leah, a lion's head, tears of excitement streamed down the rugged Xiao Hu's face. Guli, Wu Di, and the others hurried over as well. "Master, Yi Zichen, their voices reverberated in their ears, their voices tinged with joy. The man they'd been calling suddenly turned his head and smiled. "Sorry to keep you waiting." When this refreshing smile appeared in front of everyone's eyes, the same sentence appeared in everyone's mind. It was finally over. How is this possible? How is this possible? Inside the chessboard, God King Liberty's expression was ferocious. His berserk divine power wreaked havoc within the chessboard. He roared in fury, his voice echoing through the chessboard for a long time. He'd succeeded. Yi Zichen had actually succeeded. His meticulous plan to destroy the new era and strangle the Emperor Star in its cradle had come to nothing, just like that. Boom! Surging divine power bombarded the chessboard, but God King Liberty, who was only a consciousness clone, couldn't shake the chessboard in the slightest. How was it? Yao Emperor Donghuang's voice resounded from within the chessboard. His voice was completely devoid of emotion, just like when Yi Zichen had fallen into dire straits. Now that Yi Zichen had awoken, he still didn't show any signs of emotion. Neither joy nor sorrow was perhaps the best way to describe him. "Demon Emperor, you really made me look at you in a different light. You played this game of chess brilliantly." The Freedom Divine Monarch gritted his teeth and cursed. He still couldn't believe that his meticulous plan had been so easily destroyed by someone else. "This is not a game of chess played by me, but a game of chess played by our three great eras." Demon the Archdonghuang's voice reverberated within the chessboard. The epic could have coexisted with the divine race of the Outer Realm. "We didn't want to start a war, but you wanted to kill us all. You don't want to start a war because you are weak. If you were given enough time to grow, would you be able to maintain the peace between both sides?" Aggression is the innate ambition of every living creature. The Freedom God King snorted angrily. "Only by strangling all the sprouts in the cradle can we let the Outer Realm. The Protoss can enjoy their freedom without any worries." "Maybe you're right." Demon Emperor Donghuang did not refute his words. "It's just that your cautiousness has pushed us to the edge of the cliff. The failure of the first era and the second era was all for the third era to learn from. In this era, what we want to do is to tell you that Ji Hao is not your plaything. He is a wolf with fangs. When you piss us off and bare your fangs, we'll let you go. Even if you're a lion, we're willing to play with you." What shameless boasting. You've only barely withstood our first attack, yet you're already spouting such arrogant words? The Freedom God King laughed. "I don't know if it's arrogant or not, but there's no need to be so arrogant. As for what the future holds, Just wait and see. Perhaps Demon Emperor Donghuang didn't really want to argue with the Freedom God King, or perhaps he knew that even if they did, they wouldn't get anywhere. Might as well wait for time to prove everything. Prove it with results. Chapter 1811. The Freedom God King swore that this was the most ear-piercing thing he'd ever heard in his life. Just a few hours ago, he had said almost the same thing to the almighty figures of the era he had trapped in the most ridiculing tone. At the time, he'd still been basking in his own wisdom. The way he saw it, he'd been toying with the first era in the palm of his hand. Everything was going according to his plans. Little did he know, this was as far as he'd gone with his script. Everything that happened after that, whether it was his divine while trapping the surviving stars of the second era or his plans, seemed to have fallen right into the first era's trap. Until Yi Zichen woke up, he couldn't let things go on like this. The outsiders had to respond. The Freedom God King firmly believed that in the face of absolute power, any scheme would pale in comparison. Right now, it looked like the first era had the upper hand. Then I'll wait and see. Let's see who comes out on top, you wild dog or the outsider's lion. The Freedom God King's divine power surged. As he circulated it, the structure of the chessboard underwent a heaven-shaking transformation. Only then did he hear the Yao Emperor say, "Correct your choice of words. It's a wolf." Who's the rest of the 10 divine mountains? After waking up, Yi Zichen took note of the situation on the divine mountains. The experts of the 10th divine mountain couldn't compare at all to those who'd existed since the beginning of the first era. But thanks to the Upheaval Alliance's efforts, the divine mountains now had at least 100 million experts. Regardless of whether it was Chaos City or the surrounding cities, the only people left were the ones by his side. Everyone else was nowhere to be seen. There were no corpses. There was no aura of death at all. Yi Zichen closed his eyes and extended his divine sense outwards. Is that so? After a few breaths of time, Yi Zichen retracted his divine sense and nodded. With just a thought, he'd taken control of the upper 3 realms. Naturally, this wasn't something an emperor could accomplish. Transcendence. The second transcendent expert of the third era had appeared after Zhou Wu. He was none other than the Emperor's star, Yi Zichen. If one looked at the source, Zhou Wu had given up his soul in exchange for an incomplete transcendence. In truth, he'd only reached the transcendent realm with his body. Yi Zichen was this era's true transcendence, whether it was his body or his soul. In the end, I still relied on them. Yi Zichen couldn't help but smile wryly. It was as if everything had been predestined. He'd so resolutely rejected the 5 elemental spirits' existence, but in the end, they'd fused with him and transcended. He was not a stubborn person and would not do something like rejecting the 5 elemental spirits. What's more, the 5 elemental spirits were his saviors. I really didn't expect so many things to happen in the epoch while I was asleep. The other great emperors of the epoch seemed to be trapped in outer space as well. The situation is a little tricky. All these thoughts happened in the time it took for sparks to fly off a flint. When he saw their excited expressions, Yi Zichen smiled at them. It's been hard on you guys to shoulder so much for me. Leave the rest to me. However, what's wrong? Is there a problem with the fusion? Xiao Yumei and the others' expressions grew solemn. Yi Zichen's awakening was their greatest source of support. If something happened to him, this era would have no hope at all. That's not the case. Those kids are extremely compatible with me, and we've fused perfectly. I've also used the great Tao of the 5 elements to achieve true perfection and transcend. Yi Zichen was afraid they'd overthink things, so he hurriedly explained his transcendent situation to reassure them. Then, the other divine mountains seemed to be in trouble, especially the Yao 9-tailed fox clan. You might not be able to rest, so you need to hurry over and help. Yi Zichen scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. Although I've transcended, I can't split myself up. Besides, there's a big guy waiting for me. Take care of it. The others sighed in relief. So long as Yi Zichen wasn't in trouble, everything would be fine. You don't need to worry about that. Just leave it to us, said Xiao Yumei with a warm smile. Gu Li, who'd studied a bit of the Tao of space, constructed a spatial tunnel. The others didn't need any reminders. They all headed for it. Xiao Yumei and Su Yin, who were about to leave, stopped and looked at Yi Zichen intently. They didn't exchange any words, but a single look was worth more than 1,000 words. Don't worry, I'll live on. God King Joy watched them leave. During this time, he knew better than to try anything funny with the spatial tunnel. He could clearly sense the youth's aura, which made him feel a sense of danger. In a clash of such high levels, the chances of success with tricks like that weren't high, were even more laughable. He was the mighty God King Joy, the leader of the 4 God Kings of the outside realm. He disdained doing something so despicable. Furthermore, he looked at Yi Zichen, his eyes shining with crystalline light. Unpolished jade. He was a perfect piece of unpolished jade. If such a precious material fell into his hands, he'd undoubtedly carve it into the most perfect masterpiece of his life. His masterpiece might even surpass this era. Wait a moment. Yi Zichen waved at God King Joy, then carefully used his divine power to support Yin Shang and the others. Yin Shang and the others were heavily injured and on the verge of death, so they naturally stayed behind in Chaos City. Xiao Yumei and the others weren't going on a vacation. They had to hurry to the next battlefield. There might not be a transcendent expert like Zhou Wu there, nor were there any God race experts like God King Joy there. However, enemies swarmed over them like a tide. Compared to Chaos City, they might have to spend more time there. They naturally had no time to take care of Yin Shang and the others. After a long while, they finally found a relatively flat patch of ground. Yi Zichen set them down stably. Then, he formed hand seals, and a barrier of flames appeared around them. Once everything was done, Yi Zichen confirmed that there were no problems, then clapped his hands. God King Joy was still looking at him. Sorry for making you wait so long. No worries. She waved her hand generously, completely disregarding Yi Zichen's cold treatment towards them. Then, Chapter 1812. Format. He didn't understand. Was this a problem of cultural differences? Yi Zichen's words were incomprehensible. You don't understand? I thought you, the impure Earth reincarnation, had been to the modern realm before. Yi Zichen scratched his head with a coy smile. The confusion in his eyes intensified. Impure Earth reincarnation? Naturally, Yi Zichen had only thought of this after seeing those soulless reincarnators. While he was still confused, Yi Zichen kindly explained. Format? It's just the most ordinary way. Both sides introduce themselves, spout nonsense, and waste time. In the end, the one who loses will attack in a fit of rage. I used to love spouting nonsense, but now, I think it's best not to spout nonsense if you can attack. Yi Zichen scratched his head and smiled innocently. As he listened to Yi Zichen's explanation, he laughed heartily. In that case, I feel like format is pretty good. Oh, all right. I didn't think someone at your level would like this. I thought only people like it. No problem. You've come from afar, so it's fine as long as you're happy. Yi Zichen laughed like an idiot, then his gaze sharpened. Lord of the Epic Star, Yi Zichen. God King of Joy from the outside, said God King Joy. To his surprise, when God King Joy introduced himself, Yi Zichen stared at him in shock for a long time. Although his strange gaze didn't make his hair stand on end, it made him feel uneasy. You're actually his mother? Isn't he supposed to be a catfish? How did he become a clown? What strange things are you saying now? Oh, sorry, I got a bit distracted. Yi Zichen scratched his head and smiled foolishly. When his mother saw his smile, although she didn't understand what he was talking about or why he was smiling, she couldn't help but smile. Lord of the Epic Star? Hey here, I like you a lot. Are you interested in returning to the palace with me? I can guarantee you that in less than 100 years, you'll become a God King of the outside and be surrounded by tens of thousands, said his mother. Hearing that, Yi Zichen felt a chill down his spine, causing him to look at it even weirder. I don't like men. This bold statement stunned Emu again, and soon he understood the ambiguity in his words. After laughing for a long time, she looked at Yi Zichen with admiration and nodded repeatedly. You're really interesting. I really like you. Don't worry, I'm not attracted to men. I just like your character. How about it? Do you want to return to the God race with me? What about him? Yi Zichen suddenly pointed at Zhou Wu. At that moment, Zhou Wu was trapped in a cage formed by lightning. No matter how hard he struggled, he was unable to escape the cage. Not only that, but when he came into contact with the lightning around the cage, he would also suffer a backlash from the lightning. Trapped inside, he was like a berserk beast, crazily ramming against the cage. Under the backlash of the heavenly thunder, his entire body was charred black. Her mother raised her eyebrows. This guy should be your dog, right? Yi Zichen shrugged. Previously, he was the God Emperor here. His status was so exalted that everyone could only look up to him. He abandoned everything to be with you and work for you. Shouldn't you support him? Are you one of the people I look up to? His mother asked inexplicably. Of course I'm here, said Yi Zichen. Since that's the case, as long as you follow me, you won't have to look up to him. You'll even stand at a higher position than him and enjoy better treatment and conditions than him. Its funny clown face, its eye sockets were dyed black and white, rolled its eyeballs, and its red nose moved up and down. What's more, as you said, he's just a dog of mine. When have you ever seen anyone care about a dog's life or death? You are different. I think highly of you and want to see you as a human being. I can't agree with you. Where I come from, dogs are man's best friends. Yi Zichen chuckled. What's more, if I go back with you, I'll have to serve you, right? That's right. His mother nodded. Then what's the difference between that and a dog? Even if I become a god king, I'll still be under your control. So what if I become a god emperor? Yi Zichen scratched his head, then gently twisted his wrist. I'm used to being a lord. If I suddenly become someone else's grandson, I really can't take it. As for the 10,000 people you mentioned, I'm not that talented. In this new era, I have far more than 10,000 people who support me. I appreciate your good intentions, but I have no choice but to apologize. Is there no room for negotiation? His mother still hadn't given up. He really did like Yi Zichen. He'd been born when the primal chaos first split and the god race first appeared. He was the god king of the outside realm, the embodiment of joy. However, as the god king of joy, he bestowed joy upon all living beings, but he'd never experienced true joy himself. He felt empty, and even more so, he questioned why he, the God King of joy, couldn't enjoy that sort of feeling, couldn't smile in satisfaction. He couldn't help but question himself. Until 1,000,000 years ago, he traversed the various planes and came into contact with art. Art satisfied his empty soul for the first time, especially when it came to creating art. When he completed a work of art, joy welled up in his heart. From then on, his pursuit of art was unstoppable. In order to fill the emptiness in his soul, he could only continuously create art, until his understanding and pursuit of art became somewhat distorted. The way he saw it, even if he killed people from other lower planes, there was nothing wrong with it. He bestowed joy upon them, so it was only natural that the ants of the lower planes would repay him. He began destroying planes and slaughtering all living beings. He was passionate about it. He enjoyed the looks of despair on their faces. He admired the destruction of their planes. He sat on the peak of a ruined plane and gazed at the red glow of the setting sun. The third era was just one of the many planes he'd destroyed. But now, he'd run into Yi Zichen. He didn't know why, but this little fellow's words and smile made him laugh to his heart's content. He'd never felt such joy before. An interesting soul was precisely someone like Yi Zichen. In his mother's eyes, Yi Zichen was a perfect work of art. This work of art wasn't his body, but rather his soul. He wanted to keep Yi Zichen by his side, or more accurately, he wanted to keep Yi Zichen's soul by his side. I'm truly sorry. Chapter 1813. An interesting soul could be sensed from just a few words. The god monarch of pleasure firmly believed that this was the pleasure he wanted. No matter how others felt, at least he believed so. He had to. He had to bring Yi Zichen back. I didn't expect godly monarch pleasure to be so attached to me. He shyly turned around and scratched his head. His honest and harmless smile made people feel like he was a docile sheep. Little did they know, profound of fire, raging flames burning heaven. In an instant, the entire world seemed to be engulfed in raging flames. The scorching heat caused the surrounding rocks to melt into water. This sudden profundity caught God Monarch pleasure off guard. Since he couldn't turn incorporeal in time, his exposed arm also suffered some burns. The prickling pain on her skin also made God King Pleasure recall, no matter how harmless Yizichin appeared, as docile as a sheep. But no matter how docile he was still a sheep that had transcended his realm and no longer ate grass. Telekinesis, God Monarch Joy, turned into a wisp of mist and lingered in the sea of fire. Suddenly, the void trembled violently. The intense tremors caused Yizichin to involuntarily reveal a solemn expression. He carefully examined his surroundings, not daring to be even the slightest bit careless. The person standing in front of him was not a mediocre person. He was a god king of the god race. The tremors grew stronger and stronger, and under the intense tremors, cracks appeared in the void. The cracks gradually covered the entirety of Yizichin's vision, making it look like a mirror on the verge of shattering. An intense sense of danger drew closer and closer. Yizichin, who had yet to act rashly, suddenly stood stiffly in the sky. Roar! An ear-piercing roar sounded out from behind Yizichin, as if a giant beast from the abyss had opened its mouth wide. Viscous liquid dripped from its teeth from time to time, and its mouth opened and closed as if it wanted to swallow the entire world. Yizichin was shocked, but it was already too late. A huge shadow shrouded the top of his head. When he looked up, the huge mouth of the abyss beast completely swallowed him. Interesting. I didn't expect the seemingly victorious divine King Joy to mutter in such a low voice. He wasn't excited about Yizichin's capture. Instead, he ordered the beast to devour the surrounding flames. As the flames gradually dissipated, Yizichin, who was 1,000 meters away, was scratching his head in embarrassment. At the same time, Yizichin, who had been swallowed by the abyssal beast, had also turned into a wisp of flames. This wisp of flame was like a catalyst for thousands of other flames. The dead flames that were swallowed by the giant beast seemed to have a mind of their own, jumping and burning in the giant beast's abdomen. Roar! The abyssal behemoth roared in pain as it swallowed the flames. Flames shot out from its mouth from time to time, and its abdomen and back were also burned by the flames. In just a few breaths, this abyssal beast that seemed to be able to devour the world turned into dust and was blown away by the wind between heaven and earth. The flames it had swallowed all converged on Yizichin, and right in front of them was a little kid covered in flames. A fire elemental spirit. Xiaohua, well done. Yizichin patted the fire elemental spirit on the head. It smiled and nodded, then merged back into Yizichin's arm. You destroyed a battle pet I've raised for tens of thousands of years. If I don't take you back, I'll suffer a huge loss. Greed flashed through God King Joy's eyes. Although he'd raised the abyssal beast for tens of thousands of years, its death didn't seem all that sad. Is that so? I'm really sorry. I didn't know it was a battle pet you'd raised for tens of thousands of years. You have far too many origin-shattering beasts. Although that beast just now was a bit special, I thought it was mass-produced. If I knew it was a battle pet you'd raised, would you let it go? God King Joy laughed. No. Yizichin chuckled and shook his head. Then I might not let it go so easily. Who knows, I might even give it a little present. How can you say such cruel things with a smile? I like you so much, laughed God King Joy without getting angry. I beg you, please don't say you like me. I'm a straight man with countless beautiful wives. You're really giving me goosebumps. Yizichin crossed his arms and pretended to shiver, but in God King Joy's blind spot, he snapped his fingers. Profound truths of water. The ground beneath God King Joy's feet instantly transformed into a vast ocean. The raging waves roiled like a typhoon. The waves came one after another, each stronger than the last. Under the turbulent sea, there seemed to be something terrifying charging towards God Monarch Pleasure from the surging waves. Flood dragons emerged from the sea. Bang! Above the surface of the sea, for azure dragons broke out of the sea. They faced each other in pairs and took up positions in 4 directions. However, they didn't attack God King Joy. Instead, they leapt into the air as if leaping through the dragon's gate. When the four flood dragons collided, crystalline droplets rained down like a torrential downpour. God King Joy admired the water droplets falling like a work of art. Inwardly, she was dumbfounded. Why had something like this happened? A mistake? In truth, the four flood dragons were supposed to pincer attack her, but Yi Zichen had made a mistake in casting his technique. That was too low level. Even the most ordinary of lesser gods wouldn't make such a mistake. Yi Zichen was a mighty transcendent. God King Joy didn't believe he'd fall so low. Oh no! Suddenly, God King Joy recalled the scene of the flood dragons colliding and the water droplets falling. Pushing his palm forward, God King Pleasure discovered that he was completely surrounded by water curtains, condensing into a myriad face cage around him. This kind of water barrier wasn't particularly powerful. If he wanted to break it, hey, that won't do. As soon as Yi Zichen said that, the fragile water barrier began to freeze. This time, God King Joy's expression turned serious. This was troublesome. The seals were interconnected like a maze. Now that the water had turned into ice, the seal's strength had increased exponentially. But Yi Zichen didn't just want to seal them. Profound truths of water, sea burial. Whoosh! A whirlpool suddenly appeared on the vast sea beneath godly monarch Pleasure's feet. The waves around the whirlpool surged and crashed towards godly monarch Pleasure. Everything ended in the blink of an eye. The waves calmed down, but Yi Zichen couldn't relax no matter what. God King Joy died? How is that possible? If he died so easily, he wouldn't be worthy of being a god king. He knew very well. Chapter 1814. The night was silent and boundless. Only a light breeze blew past, causing his clothes to sway. The raging waves on the surface of the sea also rippled under the gentle breeze. Everything was so peaceful and beautiful. It's such a cool night. I really want to sit down and drink alone, muttered Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen muttered to himself. At that moment, the God King of Joy emerged from a pitch-black corner. Not even the slightest trace of seawater could be seen on him. Why drink alone? If you want to drink, I'll drink with you. As expected, Yi Zichen smiled wryly when he saw God King Joy. I knew he was a tough nut to crack. Getting rid of him wouldn't be easy. You have such a high status. I'm a bit nervous to drink with you. Yi Zichen grinned. God King Joy pursed his lips. However, with his clown makeup, even if he pursed his lips, you'd still think he was grinning from ear to ear. You don't seem surprised at all. What? Your profound truths of water. God King Joy gestured to the surface of the sea. I was swallowed up by your sea. You don't seem surprised to see me here at all. Don't be such a prankster. You're a god king, after all. If I could get rid of you so easily, we'd all be god kings. Yi Zichen shrugged. All right. God King Joy smiled and nodded. You know that's not what I meant. Yi Zichen rolled his eyes. God King Joy laughed heartily. Yi Zichen didn't even know why he liked to laugh so much and why it was so terrifying. I really like you so much. God King Joy took the opportunity to confess. That's enough. Don't keep repeating yourself. I know I'm outstanding, but I really can't date a man. Yi Zichen refused. Naturally, God King Joy didn't like him that way. He knew that, and Yi Zichen knew that as well. However, he'd always misinterpreted God King Joy's intentions to avoid the topic. Even so, God King Joy still expressed his love. It was all from the bottom of his heart. It's strange. No matter what era it is, you've always used the 5 elements to enter the Tao. Fortunately, God King Joy changed the subject. Perhaps this is fate, said Yi Zichen calmly. You believe in fate? God King Pleasure raised her brows. I don't. Yi Zichen shrugged. Of course, that was in the past. Yi Zichen kicked the pebbles under his feet lightly, then looked at the dark sky in disappointment. A long time ago, the sky in which I lived was blue. Although the pollution there is very serious, when you are lucky, you can still see the bright blue sky like a gem. That should be a very beautiful world. God Monarch Pleasure nodded. Of course. So beautiful. Yi Zichen sighed. People are always like that. They only know how to treasure something after losing it. Just like me. At that time, I really hated that world. I imagined that one day I could enter the world in the novel, punish the evil, and uphold the good, and settle the debts of gratitude and enmity. In the end, godly monarch Pleasure said, in the end, everything wasn't what I thought it would be. Yi Zichen twitched his mouth helplessly. Ever since I came here, I've been feeling more and more pressure, so much so that I can't even breathe. I want to live for myself, but I feel that I'm too selfish, so I can only put righteousness first. It's not a bad thing to be a little selfish. Godly monarch Pleasure seemed to agree with him. I've seen far too many righteous people die young and spend their entire lives running for their lives. But those who are selfish and live for themselves are living well, and they are very satisfied. This is what they mean by good people don't live long, while bad people live for 1,000 years, Yi Zichen sighed. But what does that have to do with your belief in fate? Godly monarch Pleasure didn't understand. Yes, of course it does, and it's very close. Yi Zichen nodded, then looked at godly monarch Pleasure with a look of confirmation. But it'll take a lot of time to explain it clearly. Do you want to hear it? Of course. Godly monarch Pleasure nodded. But I don't seem to have much time. To be honest, you really aren't as kind as you look. Yi Zichen's gaze suddenly darkened. Right behind him, Zhou Wu had already entered his attack range. I never said that I'm kind. As soon as godly monarch Pleasure finished, Yi Zichen, die for this emperor. Boom! Yi Zichen, who had his back to him, somersaulted a few times agilely, then flipped several tens of meters forward. Zhou Wu's fist smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. The seawater had already soaked the ground, so when Zhou Wu's fist landed, a lot of mud splashed onto Yi Zichen's clothes. These are new clothes. Yi Zichen looked at the mud on his body and sighed regretfully. I didn't expect godly monarch Pleasure to go save Zhou Wu while she was gone. He's a godly monarch after all. Isn't it better to fight him fair and square? Just him alone is enough to give Yi Zichen a headache. Now, there's another one. AI. Yi Zichen let out a deep sigh. At the same time, rain began to fall from the sky. The rain came too suddenly. When the raindrops hit the ground, they drenched it. Countless flowers and trees burst out of the ground, and in the span of a few breaths, a lush green field had appeared. Profound meaning of water, growth of all things. The surrounding vegetation rapidly grew. At the same time, it was as if the plants had come to life. Their vines extended outwards and bound Zhou Wu's arms tightly. The flowers and grass on the ground also bound his legs, making it impossible for him to move. Puny vines, you still want to... Zhou Wu subconsciously wanted to break free, but he only managed to say half of what he wanted to say. It seemed he'd underestimated these vines. Lil Lightning, Lil Lightning. Two children about 4 years old emerged from Yi Zichen's arms. However, their eyes and expressions weren't as innocent as child's. You two, go play with him. With that, the lightning fairy nodded solemnly. Of the 5 elemental fairies, he was the most mature, so he had more business to attend to. When the lightning fairy heard that, he smiled wickedly. Playing with a transcendent? Interesting. I like it. Don't get careless. Even if that guy doesn't have a soul, he's still a transcendent. Don't get careless. If anything happens, I won't be able to save you, warned Yi Zichen. Just don't make us save you. The lightning fairy snickered. As he watched them leave, Yi Zichen rubbed his nose. He'd been looked down on, but perhaps it really was as the lightning fairy said. As long as they didn't act too rashly, they should be fine against Zhou Wu. As for himself, godly monarch Pleasure. Chapter 1815. Boom, boom, boom. In the tranquil night, the sounds of battle rang out incessantly. Yi Zichen looked up into the sky and saw a rainbow of light. Wings of the wind coalesced behind Yi Zichen's back, and countless disc-shaped wind blades circled around him. In the short span of 100 breaths, God King Joy and Yi Zichen had exchanged hundreds of blows. Such a high-intensity battle inevitably exhausted Yi Zichen, and his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. You're truly too amazing. You belong to me. God King Joy wasn't in much better shape. As Yi Zichen panted, his eyes shone with excitement. However, his clothes had long since been torn to shreds. He hadn't properly transformed his physical body into an incorporeal one. His arms were also covered in several bloody gashes. Dazzling golden blood flowed from his wounds to his arms and fingers, then dripped down from the sky. However, before the blood could fall more than a few meters, it was swept away by the howling winds below. You really shouldn't be so attached to me. No matter how much you like me, I can't possibly like another man. Yi Zichen sounded exhausted. He'd split off his lightning elemental sprites to deal with Zhou Wu in order to not lose out to God King Joy, even though the 5 elements were missing. Thus, he'd gone all out from the very beginning, laying down a wind barrier around him and God King Joy. In addition to stabilizing the barrier, he also had to calculate when God King Joy's mental body would transform from incorporeal to physical. It took a huge toll on both his physical and mental strength. He wasn't injured, and God Monarch Pleasure hadn't really done anything to him yet. However, his entire body was drenched in sweat, as if he'd just been fished out of a pool. Even so, his face was brimming with smiles. You know that's not what I meant. I'm just praising you from the bottom of my heart. God King Joy licked his lips and looked at Yi Zichen greedily. To him, Yi Zichen was a priceless treasure. Yi Zichen was someone who could save his soul. The more he interacted with Yi Zichen, the firmer his conviction became. If he could keep Yi Zichen's soul by his side, he'd feel far more joy than creating a work of art. It was precisely because of God King Joy's excessive love that he didn't dare go all out against Yi Zichen. He was afraid of hurting Yi Zichen and affecting his interesting soul. Actually, I'm not that great. Yi Zichen scratched his head with a silly smile. Yi Zichen's smile was exactly what it wanted to see. When he saw this, he felt as if his entire being had been liberated. After staring blankly for a long time, God King Pleasure's gaze suddenly darkened. This was also the first time he looked at Yi Zichen with such a serious gaze. He made up his mind. No matter what, he had to bring Yi Zichen's soul back to the God realm. If he continued to act like a coward, bringing the transcendent Yi Zichen back with him would be impossible. Perhaps in the end, he would have to pay the price for his cowardly decision. Although he was reluctant to part with Yi Zichen, if Yi Zichen continued to refuse his request, he had no choice but to use forceful methods and extract his soul. But before that, I'll ask you again, are you willing to return to the God race with me? Yi Zichen could clearly sense the surging divine power around him. From her gaze, he could guess that the God King of Pleasure was finally getting serious, and this sentence would be the last warning to him. He was probably going to have to say goodbye to the treatment that the happy God King had received previously. Don't blame me for not warning you. If I really attack you, you might really be covered in wounds. You're also missing 2 elemental spirits among the 5 elements, so your chances of winning against me are even slimmer. Are you threatening me? Yi Zichen scratched his head. This is not a threat, but a statement of fact. The Divine King's methods are definitely far beyond your imagination. Even if you are a transcendent, the most outstanding existence in the entire era. But compared to us God Kings who were born at the beginning of the chaos, you're still too young, God King Pleasure said seriously. A God King born at the beginning of the primal chaos? Yi Zichen didn't deny the truth of God King Joy's words. He transcended less than 2 hours ago, and there were still many powers he hadn't fully comprehended. The God King of Pleasure had existed for a long time, and this long period of time had not only given him pure divine power. He'd also had ample time to comprehend the Tao of the heavens and earth. The difference between the two of them was like a chasm between heaven and earth. God King Joy had only a few words to express it. But even so what? If Yi Zichen followed God King Joy back to the God race, just as he'd said, he'd help him become a God King, enjoy wealth, and abandon the entire era. Was that even possible? There were far too many people in this era who were important to him, and they'd all agreed to return to the modern realm together. They were all waiting for him. Once he dealt with the God race, the era would no longer be a threat, and they could return to their former paradise. I'm truly sorry, but I'll have to disappoint you. Whoosh! There was the sound of crashing waves. As soon as Yi Zichen finished speaking, he heard the sound of crashing waves behind him. When he turned around, he saw that a crack had suddenly appeared in the void, and surging seawater gushed out from that crack. Like a primordial beast, a ferocious beast roared and attacked. The powerful impact destroyed all the trees and buildings on the ground, and even the God King was swept into the sea. Profound mysteries of wind and fire. Summon, Purgatory, Flame Demon. Suddenly, a giant hand wreathed in flames tore the sky apart. Then, a foot covered in flames stepped out. The foot was over 100 feet long. As soon as it stepped into the new era, it was as if space couldn't bear its weight, and the space beneath it began to crack. The cracks gradually widened, and a purgatory flame demon covered in flames appeared before everyone's eyes. Flames raged around the demon's body, and fierce winds howled around him. Accompanied by the wind, the flames on his body burned even more fiercely. Roar! The flame demon pounded its chest and roared, as if venting its displeasure at being summoned from the other realm. Its roar shook the hearts of everyone present, and the sound waves shattered all the buildings in the city. His hands, which were burning with flames, smashed the void, shattering it into pieces. The purgatory flame demon glanced at Yi Zichen. As a summoned creature of the other realm, it could connect to its summoner. Was it you who summoned this king? Chapter 1816. He'd already been washed away by the sea, but he'd already broken free. He stood in the sky and looked at the enormous creature before him. Its flames illuminated half the sky, and it was several times larger than even the outer-verse origin-shattering beasts. His heart was filled with shock. What plane of existence was this? He'd been born from the primal chaos and wandered countless planes, yet he'd never seen this kind of creature before. Were there other planes the outer-verse hadn't discovered yet? This enormous creature was most likely one of Yi Zichen's summoned creatures. However, Yi Zichen's cultivation didn't seem strong enough to control it. Purgatory Flame Demon, obey my orders and fight for me. Yi Zichen pointed towards their mother's position and gave the Purgatory Flame Demon an order. A creepy smile spread across the Purgatory Flame Demon's entire face. It licked the flames on the back of its hand and looked playfully at the frowning Yi Zichen. Why should I? The Purgatory Flame Demon laughed mockingly and glanced at it. That guy looks like a tough nut to crack. Why would I want to make an enemy out of him? You're my summoned creature, and that's right, I'm your summoned creature. The demon nodded non-committally. If you were strong enough, I would naturally obey your orders. It's the law of the jungle, after all. This principle applies to me as well. But do you think that you, in your current weak state, can still order this king around? Order me. When he heard that, Yi Zichen's expression changed dramatically. His mother, who'd been paying close attention, grew solemn. This was a summoner's disadvantage. Summoners might be able to summon otherworldly creatures that were far stronger than their enemies, but otherworldly creatures were unpredictable. It wasn't uncommon to run into creatures that didn't listen to orders. In the worst-case scenario, they might even turn on their master. That was exactly what Yi Zichen was facing. The difference in strength between this king-level Purgatory Flame Demon and Yi Zichen was too great. It didn't care about Yi Zichen at all. The best way to deal with this situation was summon, expel. Yi Zichen formed a series of hand seals. The Purgatory Flame Demon obviously wouldn't obey his orders. Since they couldn't get any help from him, they could only drive him back to the dimensional space. Otherwise, leaving him here would be a disaster for the era. A Purgatory King that no one could restrain would be left behind. You want this king to leave. The Purgatory Flame Demon grinned, then suddenly shot out 2 fiery ropes from its arms and bound Yi Zichen tightly, causing his hand seals to stop. It's been a long time since this king came to an alternate dimension. If I didn't have fun, how could I return so easily? The flame ropes bound Yi Zichen tightly, causing him to be unable to break free. The Purgatory Flame Demon looked around. From the looks of it, your alternate space has encountered an irresistible attack. It's no wonder you took the risk to summon this king. Do you wish to use this king to save you from your predicament? You're thinking too much. This king hates saving lives the most. This king likes to join in the fun and make this place even more. Chaos is good. The Purgatory Flame Demon laughed loudly. Yi Zichen, who was tied up, glared at him with eyes that seemed to spit fire. All right, in order to prevent this king's fun from being interrupted, Please, die. The purgatory flame demon snapped his fingers, causing the entire city to turn into a sea of flames. The flames continuously converged on Yi Zichen, enveloping him in a sea of fire and burning him. However, at that very moment, the flames surrounding Yi Zichen were dispelled. Only when they were completely gone did the purgatory flame demon stand proudly in front of Yi Zichen and stare at the enormous creature in front of him. Hey, big guy, this is the prey I've set my eyes on. Did you get my permission to hurt him? It's you little shorty. The purgatory flame demon frowned. Aren't you two enemies? This king burning him shouldn't be to your liking. What are you doing now? That's where you're wrong, big guy. This king has never viewed him as an enemy. God King Joy squinted his eyes and smiled. God Monarch Joy squinted her eyes and smiled. I like him very much. I was just thinking about how to reform him and let him go back with me. If you burn him, I'll be very sad. Little shorty, this king doesn't care if you're sad or not. Anyone who dares to stop this king from killing must die. The raging flames swept through the air, seeming as if they wanted to incinerate the heavens and earth. God King Joy raised his right hand and pushed it forward, forming a golden mirror in front of him that blocked the purgatory flame demon's flames. God King Joy. Yi Zichen looked at the person in front of him in shock. At the same time, God King Joy turned around and smiled. Don't worry, I'll deal with this guy for you. While you're dealing with him, I suggest you reconsider whether or not you want to come back with me. I like you very much. I don't like men. Yi Zichen was speechless. You know that's not what I meant. God King Joy smiled, then turned around again. There's no time for small talk. Even I feel a bit pressured by this big guy you summoned. Hey, I saved your life this time. I'm really sorry. All of a sudden, Yi Zichen apologized from the bottom of his heart. Then, God King Joy saw the ropes binding Yi Zichen disappear, as well as the flames he was resisting. When he looked at his own body, he saw that he'd been tied up like a dumpling by the fire ropes. The purgatory flame demon was still there, but the flaming rope on his arm was completely bound to godly monarch pleasure. God King Joy finally understood that everything just now was just a show between Yi Zichen and the purgatory flame demon. Your Majesty, I'm truly sorry. I clearly wanted to fight you fair and square, but I used such despicable methods. Yi Zichen, his eyes turned bloodshot as he looked at Yi Zichen, who was standing right in front of him. You actually lied to me. You actually used my fondness for you to plot against me. Do you know just how much I admire you? I didn't know before, but just now I know. God King Joy's admiration for Yi Zichen never stopped. Yi Zichen merely treated it as a joke and didn't take it to heart. That was until the moment God King Joy appeared in front of him and fought against the purgatory flame demon. Yi Zichen knew that God King Joy wasn't joking. He was serious. You lied to me. You lied to me. Chapter 18:17. The purgatory flame demon's fiery ropes wrapped tightly around God King Joy's limbs. Her mother, who'd been bundled up like a dumpling, glared at Yi Zichen, her eyes spitting fire. He'd never been so angry before. He bestowed joy upon all living beings. From the moment he was born, he'd been high above everyone else. No one dared to disobey him. Anyone who did was reduced to a pile of white bones. Yi Zichen was the only one who'd refused him multiple times, yet still wanted to sincerely change him. But he'd been tricked. Yi Zichen had used his mother's desire for him to put on a show with the purgatory flame demon. Yi Zichen, he roared angrily, his eyes bloodshot. His towering rage caused the clouds to swirl and the winds to howl. He wanted to vent his anger with a roar, and even more so, he wanted to use his gaze to ask Yi Zichen why he had done such a thing. He felt guilty. Yi Zichen subconsciously averted his gaze when he was met with their gaze. He had to admit that he'd used despicable methods and his mother's passion for him to turn the situation around. I'm sorry. Yi Zichen had nothing to say. All he could do was apologize. I admire you so much. You're the only person in the countless planes I admire so much, but what are you doing now? Yi Zichen, you've truly disappointed me. He gnashed his teeth. I'm truly sorry. Yi Zichen bowed deeply towards his mother. His heart was filled with guilt, but he didn't stop there. He continuously formed hand seals with his hands and muttered several incantations. Not long after, a vast ocean appeared beneath their feet. Countless burly elemental water, men crawled out from the turbulent sea. Yizichin estimated that there were at least 30 of them. The moment they appeared, they raised their hands high into the air and bound him even more tightly with their water whips. Huh, his mother sneered. The pressure from his limbs and body was like a catalyst for his anger, causing it to burn even brighter. This was too interesting. He'd never treated someone with sincerity before, yet this was the result. It seemed like he'd been too naive. Yizichin's actions were like a fiery slap to his face, instantly waking him up from his dream of making friends. Treat someone with sincerity and use your heart to influence him. If he wanted Yizichin, he could just snatch him away with his own hands. He didn't care about Yizichin's body. He only wanted his soul. If his soul refused to obey him, he could whip it with his soul. Whip it until it submitted. This childish way of making friends was too stupid. Star-Lord Era, I'm really grateful. You've taught me a good lesson with your actions. I've truly benefited from this lesson. Yizichin sighed deeply. Yizichin couldn't help but sigh. The reason why he hadn't done anything to them for so long was because he felt guilty. He'd actually stood up to save him in that moment of danger. That sort of action was too much of a visual and psychological impact on Yizichin. But now was not the time to be soft-hearted. Even if what he did back then was very touching, the two of them were still on opposing sides. He was the God King of pleasure from the outer realm, and he came to destroy the era. Zhou Wu was the bomb he had left in the epic, causing the epic to be in a state of devastation. God Yizichin wasn't as friendly to the Era Lord as he was to Yizichin. As the Era's planet lord, he had to stand on the Era Lord's side. I've said enough apologies. Even if I say any more, I won't be able to quell your anger. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being the God King of the outside. I'm the Era's planet lord. From the moment we were born, we were destined to be irreconcilable enemies. No matter what we do, we can't be friends. You're right. Just now I thought of that as well. God Yizichin's expression darkened. He no longer looked at Yizichin with the admiration in his eyes. Then, a contemptuous smile appeared on his face as he looked at the flaming ropes that bound his limbs and the water whips that bound his body. Do you think you can stop me with just this? You should know that I'm a Tao cognition body. Flame demon. Yizichin's gaze froze. The purgatory flame demon's arms frantically shot out fiery ropes and wrapped them around God Yizichin. The number of water people on the surface of the ocean continued to increase, and the long whips in their hands were lashing out at the creature's body. Psychokinesis means that it's illusory. No matter how you try to restrain it, it's all futile. Its mocking voice echoed in Yizichin's ears. At the same time, Yizichin transformed into a beam of light and shot towards it. It's still too early for you to kill a god. Accompanied by its laughter, he, who was bound by the Balrog and the water elements, broke free in an instant. All Yizichin did was rub the corner of his robes. He didn't even cause him any actual harm. Just like that, he let them leave the encirclement and stood proudly in the sky, laughing contemptuously. Are you very disappointed? Your meticulous plan did not manage to gain any benefits? She pursed her lips and glared at Yizichin with undisguisable rage. Yizichin merely stood where he had tied them up and looked down from the sky, as if he was blaming himself for his mistake. However, after a moment of silence, he didn't reply. Instead, he flew directly towards Zhou Wu. His actions confused the creature. Could it be that Yizichin wanted to deal with Zhou Wu first, then fight me? Suddenly, he looked towards the left side of his waist. Since he'd come in a hurry, he hadn't brought any containers to store the goods he'd traded with. He could only store the memories he'd traded with Zhou Wu on his belt. At that moment, the ball of light on his belt had disappeared. Then he looked towards Yizichin's hand and saw that he was clutching the memory. The creature was indifferent. It never would have guessed that Yizichin's goal was the memory. No wonder the Balrog and the water elementals had intentionally left the left side of his waist open when they tied him up. All of this was so that Yi Zichen could conveniently snatch the memory away. He'd been tricked again. The creature looked at Yi Zichen, who'd already reached Zhou Wu's side and was about to place the memory back into his sea of consciousness. Lord of the Epic Star. The deafening roar reverberated in Yi Zichen's mind, but he acted as if he hadn't heard it at all. He looked at Zhou Wu, who was still struggling like a wild beast under the suppression of the lightning elements. Behave yourself for this, Daddy. Chapter 1818. The ball of memories slammed into Zhou Wu's sea of consciousness. Zhou Wu wasn't particularly fond of interacting with others, so his memories with the Divine Arbiter took up a third of his total. His memories hadn't been stripped away for very long, so there were still gaps in his sea of consciousness. Even so, the memories instantly filled his entire sea of consciousness. This sudden feeling of being filled caused Zhou Wu to hug his head in pain. The lightning sprite returned to Yi Zichen's side, and the other elemental fairies emerged from the arm as well. They looked at Zhou Wu vigilantly, or at Zhou Wu, who was howling in pain as his memories filled up. Success or failure depended on this gamble. Yi Zichen had just transcended. His cultivation wasn't all that stable, and he hadn't yet fully digested all of his techniques. If he were a transcendent from the first era, facing off against the God King of Pleasure might have been even. But against her, his chances of victory were less than 50%. That being the case, he had to seek outside help. Zhou Wu was the best candidate Yi Zichen could find. They were both in the transcendent realm. Although he didn't have a soul and couldn't use Tao techniques, his strength was transcendent. In terms of strength, he could pose some threat to her. That way, she'd have to worry about Zhou Wu, and Yi Zichen's profound mysteries of the five elements might have unexpected results. As for why Yi Zichen was so sure Zhou Wu was on his side, while the elemental fairies were forming the arm, he'd seemed unconscious, but his consciousness was actually quite clear. He'd seen all of Zhou Wu's sacrifices to resurrect the Divine Arbiter. After stripping away her memories, God King of Pleasure had broken her promise. She'd obliterated the Divine Arbiter's final chance at life and her unborn child. Now that Zhou Wu knew the truth, there was no way he'd let her off the hook. He was betting on Zhou Wu's feelings for the Divine Arbiter. Even if he lost, the situation wouldn't be any worse than it was now. Zhou was on her side. However, if he won the bet, it would be equivalent to snatching Zhou Wu, who was by his mother's side, into his hands. If two transcendent experts joined forces, it wouldn't be impossible for them to defeat the God King of the Outlands. After a few dozen breaths of time, Zhou Wu stopped howling in pain. Divine Arbiter. He lowered his head and hugged his head, but at this moment, it roared angrily from a void. What are you doing? Hurry up and finish him off. Don't you want to save that woman? Zhou Wu suddenly looked up, stared intently at Yi Zichen, and instantly swung his fist. Bang! Yi Zichen forcefully blocked the punch. The elemental spirits advanced, but were stopped by Yi Zichen. Just as Zhou Wu was about to punch again, I suggest you take a look at these. A screen of water appeared between Zhou Wu and Yi Zichen. Slowly, a series of images appeared on the screen. Zhou Wu, who did not want to pay attention to this, was attracted by the scene on the water screen after a few glances. He stared at the water screen, occasionally glancing at the Divine Arbiter, until he saw the Divine Arbiter killing it. Divine Arbiter! She's right there. He pointed to the ground. Inside the barrier, the Divine Arbiter lay with Yin Shang and the others. Bang! In an instant, Zhou Wu's aura became chaotic. There was no need for superfluous words. Zhou Wu stomped through the air, transformed into a blur, and punched the Divine Arbiter. His fist pierced through the Divine Arbiter's body, hurtling him several hundred meters away. Zhou Wu steadied himself, then charged at the Divine Arbiter once more. Zhou Wu, are you trying to kill your master? Shut up, you filthy clown. Zhou Wu clenched his fists, causing the air around him to explode. Pay with your life for the Divine Arbiters. You trust him, but you don't trust me. Him? Zhou Wu glanced behind him. Yi Zichen was already hurrying over. I trust him even more. No one would have guessed Zhou Wu would say something like this. He'd once disliked Yi Zichen so much. Not long ago, he'd wanted to kill him, but now he chose to trust him. Sometimes, trust was hard to explain. You. Enough with you. Die. Zhou Wu grabbed the Divine Arbiter's head, then slammed his fist into the Divine Arbiter's face, causing the bones in his face to cave in. After taking a punch, the Divine Arbiter transformed from solid to incorporeal, then flew several hundred meters away. The body with its bones caved in was directly abandoned, and a new body was formed once again. Zhou Wu, you're trying to kill your master. So what if I'm trying to kill my master? Don't forget, your soul is still in my hands. A soul suddenly appeared in the Divine Arbiter's hand. It was none other than God Emperor Zhou Wu's soul. The Divine Arbiter clutched his soul tightly, causing it to glow with pain. A few hundred meters away, Zhou Wu knit his brows and grimaced in pain. Kid, don't forget who it was that helped you transcend. In order to transcend, you traded your soul with me. Right now, your soul is in my hands. All I have to do is squeeze it a little harder. As the Divine Arbiter tightened its grip, Zhou Wu coughed up a mouthful of blood. You dare disobey me? No one has ever dared defy my artwork. Ugh! Zhou Wu coughed up more and more blood, while the intense pain from his soul caused him to clutch his head and kneel on the ground. Yi Zichen also frowned. He didn't expect Zhou Wu's soul to be in the Divine Arbiter's hands. Planet Lord of the First Era, the same goes for you. There's nothing that I can't get my eyes on. At that very moment, an afterimage suddenly flashed past in the sky. Yi Zichen looked towards the Divine Arbiter's position and saw another psychic entity appear beside him. Divine King of Freedom. His appearance here meant that he had adjusted the psychic entity's position. His meticulous plan had been foiled. Why did you come? Let's go. The plan has failed, and the God race has suffered a heavy blow. We need to hurry back to the clan and come up with a plan. The Divine King of Freedom grabbed the Divine Arbiter's arm, but the Divine Arbiter flung it away. This isn't over yet. Do you not understand what I'm saying? The plan has failed. The Divine King of Freedom roared angrily. This is the 7th time the God Emperor has summoned us back. If we return late, then you can imagine the God Emperor's rage. The surviving stars of the Second Era are also approaching. If we continue to stay here, then we will only lose everything. Damn it. The Divine Arbiter clenched his teeth, then snorted angrily at Zhou Wu's soul. You can decide for yourself whether or not you want to return to my side. But don't blame me for not telling you. Disobeying me will only result in death. Chapter 1819. The two extraterritorial God Monarchs' psyche bodies left, but God Monarch Joy's threatening words still reverberated above Chaotic City for a long time. Yi Zichen didn't rashly chase after them. First of all, he couldn't catch up to them. What's more, the gods were just outside the era. If he chased after them rashly, the situation he'd just managed to stabilize might worsen. Fighting God King Joy had consumed a great deal of Yi Zichen's energy. He needed to take advantage of this opportunity to recover. Even if he couldn't return to peak condition, he couldn't risk facing the outside's greater challenges. The era's self-healing abilities began to repair the ruined space. Yi Zichen sat cross-legged on the ground, clutching several bottles filled with pills. Suddenly, a beam of fiery light shot towards him. The surrounding temperature instantly surged. Yi Zichen, who'd fused with the fire elemental spirits, didn't seem uncomfortable in the face of this heat. He swallowed 2 elixirs and looked ahead. The Purgatory Flame Demon that he had summoned was standing right in front of him. Great Era Leader! The Purgatory Flame Demon placed its fiery hands on its chest and bent its right leg, as if bowing to Yi Zichen. Just as the demon was about to kneel, Yi Zichen raised his hand and gently held it in place. Flame Demon King, there's no need for that. I'll have a trouble you this time. The Flame Demon race is eternally loyal to the Era Leader. Planet Lord, please dispatch us at any time. As he spoke, the Purgatory Flame Demon's body gradually turned transparent. However, before it disappeared, it looked at Yi Zichen with respect. My understanding of power is still too shallow. I can only summon the Purgatory Flame Demon for such a short time. The fusion of the 5 elemental spirits calmed the 3 rampaging energies in Yi Zichen's body. They represented the 5 elements of heaven and earth. So naturally, Yi Zichen's Tao of the 5 elements reached perfection and condensed a Tao heart. As his Tao heart condensed, Yi Zichen's sea of consciousness gained many new elemental mysteries. Among them, the Purgatory Flame Demon was one of the fire elemental mysteries. According to the records in the Tao heart, Purgatory Flame Demons lived in the distant Purgatory space outside the epic. An adult Purgatory Flame Demon's combat strength was even higher than a transcendent epic, and it could last for several hours. However, Yi Zichen had just transcended, so he could only summon the Inferno Demon for a few minutes. The Flame Demon could only use the most ordinary flames, and could not use any other combat skills. If God Monarch Joy's fire elemental profundity had been comprehended to the pinnacle, it would have been very difficult for her to leave this place easily. Godly Monarch Pleasure had personally said that he felt an unprecedented sense of danger from the Purgatory Flame Demon. Unfortunately, time was still too short. Yi Zichen sighed regretfully, then couldn't help but look down at his hands. The 5 elemental arms allowed his 5 elemental Tao to condense his Tao heart. However, their fusion was not only a good thing. As they fused with him, Yi Zichen's Tao of the 5 elements grew exponentially stronger. This completely suppressed the power of his godheads and stars, which had once been the backbone of the 3 clans. I wonder if this is a blessing or a curse. Yi Zichen muttered to himself, but before he could finish his sentence, he heard a childish retort. What do you mean by that? We are your saviors. The one who spoke was the fire elemental spirit. He put his hands on his hips and spoke like a little adult. A Purgatory Flame Demon with fire elemental profundities can hold its own against multiple transcending experts for an hour. I'm sure you know the value of other elemental profundities. The few of us can even fight on our own, completely relying on our own will to control the natural elements. Yet you're hesitating? Are they worth more than the power of godheads and the power of the stars? Maybe. Yi Zichen didn't argue back. From the elemental spirits' expressions, it was clear that they believed that their self-awareness and ability to control the elements on their own would be very valuable in real combat. That was indeed the case. Just now, Yi Zichen had ordered the lightning elemental spirits to deal with Zhou Wu. The fact that the elemental spirits could share Yi Zichen's burden was their advantage. Little did they know, Yi Zichen was hesitating because of their self-awareness. Having self-awareness meant that they wouldn't completely obey Yi Zichen's orders. They would make their own decisions based on the actual situation. If, at a critical moment, the elemental spirits decided to quit, the second era was a living example. Yi Zichen rubbed his nose and pushed these thoughts to the back of his mind. Now that he'd fused with the 5 elemental spirits, thinking about such things was pointless. No matter what, fusing with the 5 elemental spirits was beneficial. As for whether the benefits outweighed the drawbacks, he'd have to slowly figure out. Right now, he was more concerned about Zhou Wu. After this battle, he'd gained a solid understanding of the God King's power. Yi Zichen was certain that God King Joy wasn't serious yet. Even so, he couldn't take advantage of her. The God King had already sounded the horn to attack. Knowing that someone had transcended in the first era, they wouldn't give themselves too much time. Stubbornly defending wasn't a good idea. The defense of the first era also ended up being destroyed in the end. In this smoke-filled war, the best way to defend was to attack. The first era's Master of the Stars had probably thought of this as well, which was why he'd sent so many resources and talents to the third era. The first era needed to fight back against the god race. As such, they couldn't do without top-tier experts. Zhou Wu, who'd also transcended, was the perfect candidate. Of course, that was on the premise that they could snatch his soul back. Yi Zichen looked at Zhou Wu. His soul was in God King Joy's hands. The torture he'd suffered just now had affected him considerably. However, Yi Zichen guessed that he'd recovered from it by now. He'd wanted to discuss how to snatch his soul back from God King Joy's hands. Divine Arbiter. Zhou Wu knelt on the ground, his face contorted in pain. He held the divine arbiter, who'd long since lost all contact. Divine arbiter, wake up. Divine arbiter, it's me, Zhou. Zhou knelt on the ground, sobbing. He shook the divine arbiter in his arms, calling out to her without pause. But the woman who'd once loved him so deeply hadn't said a single word to him. When he saw this, Yi Zichen could only sigh. He didn't want to see the divine arbiter die either. Even now, he could still remember how the divine arbiter had contacted them behind Zhou Wu's back. However, she'd sworn that she'd never betray Zhou Wu. To outsiders, the divine arbiter was a foolish woman. Even though Zhou Wu had long since lost all reason, she'd used her own methods to save him. Even though Zhou Wu had attacked her with weapons, all she'd thought about was saving their child. How foolish. Was it worth it for Zhou Wu? Anyone would think the same way. But if someone could see how Zhou Wu treated her, how petty he'd been to save her, ask yourself this. Perhaps it had been worth it. Zhou Wu had betrayed everyone in the world, but the divine arbiter still held an important place in his heart. However, Chapter 1820. After a while, Zhou Wu stopped crying. He held the divine arbiter by his arms and stared blankly ahead. He looked like a statue. Yi Zichen couldn't bear to see Zhou Wu so depressed. He rushed up to him and gently patted him on the shoulder. My condolences. As soon as his hand touched Zhou Wu's shoulder, he trembled. Then he turned around, clutched the divine arbiter in his left hand, and grabbed Yi Zichen's trousers with his right. His eyes were filled with longing and pleading. Star-Lord Yi, you have a way, don't you? Please, save her. I can give you all the starlight I stole from Wuxing. If you want it, if I have it, I'll give it all to you. Zhou Wu knelt on the ground and looked pleadingly at Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel moved. For the divine arbiter's sake, he was willing to humble himself so much. He was the god emperor of the god race, a fierce and ambitious character of his generation. Yi Zichen was sure that even his old rivals, the Ocean Emperor and Great Emperor Bayan, would be moved. Star-Lord Yi, I'm sorry. After a while, Yi Zichen looked directly into Zhou Wu's pleading eyes and said, I'm sorry. When he heard this, Zhou Wu couldn't help but shake his head and point at Yinshang. They're all on the verge of death, but their auras are much stronger than before. That's probably because of the brand on their chests. You did it, didn't you? Why can they do it, but the divine arbiter can't? Could it be that you want to avenge them and punish them this way? Me? Please don't. You can kill me, but if you can save the divine arbiter, I'll hand my life over to you. You could do whatever you want with me. Star-Lord Yi, I beg you, I'm really begging you. I'll kowtow to you. As he spoke, Zhou Wu knelt and kowtowed to Yi Zichen. The rubble on the ground made his head bleed, but he acted as if he didn't notice. He kowtowed without pause and with increasing force. Yi Zichen grabbed him by the shoulder. Feeling the resistance, Zhou Wu looked up. Yi, Zhou Wu, I really can't save the divine arbiter. If I could, even without you telling me, I'd save her. Yi Zichen looked straight into Zhou Wu's eyes and muttered, The reason I can't save the divine arbiter is because she's fundamentally different from Yinshang and the others. That is, Yinshang and the others are on the verge of death, but they're still hanging on. He took a deep breath. The divine arbiter was dead. There might be a way to resurrect the dead, but I don't know how. How is that possible? The divine arbiter was clearly still breathing. Godly monarch pleasure killed her. It was godly monarch pleasure who buried her final chance of survival. Yi Zichen roared angrily, but Zhou Wu didn't respond. Just like before, his eyes were blank as he muttered to himself. Zhou Wu, the dead cannot be revived. No one wanted to see the divine arbiter die, but it had already happened. Now, the extraterritorial god clan is attacking our era. As a transcendent realm expert, don't you want to contribute your strength to the era? Even if you don't you want to avenge the divine arbiter? The horn of war between the extraterritorial god clan and our era has already sounded. I don't want to sit here and wait for death. I'm preparing to lead our people into the outside. We need your strength. Leave behind godly monarch pleasure's soul, and I'll think of a way to snatch you back. You. Yi Zichen was speechless. No matter what Yi Zichen said, Zhou Wu didn't respond. He didn't even look at him. Zhou Wu, Yi Zichen grabbed Zhou Wu by the shoulders and lifted his head. When their eyes met, he saw a pair of eyes filled with the aura of death. There was no greater sorrow than a dead heart. Although Zhou Wu was still alive, he was no different from a dead man. His life, he'd already gone with the Divine Arbiter. AI. Yi Zichen let go of Zhou Wu's shoulders with a heavy sigh. Zhou Wu's head drooped as he hugged the Divine Arbiter. His eyes were unfocused as he stared blankly ahead. This was absolutely not good news for the era. The extraterritorial god clan was already at their doorstep, but as a transcendent realm expert, Zhou Wu. All right, Yi Zichen let out a deep sigh, then nodded heavily. He understood, thinking back on his actions just now. Sending Zhou Wu out to face the enemy in a situation like this really was a bit too utilitarian. If the Divine Arbiter had been replaced by someone important to him, he might have ended up like Zhou Wu. However, understanding was one thing. When he saw Zhou Wu so downcast, Yi Zichen truly worried for the entire era. Screech. The sound of something slicing through the air rang out, and the resulting spatial tremors indicated that the newcomers were at least at the Imperial Emperor level. Such experts had appeared at a time like this. Could the extraterritorial god clan have invaded? When he considered this, Yi Zichen's heart trembled. He looked up into the sky. Qi Mei. At the very front of the group was none other than Qi Mei, the nine-tailed fox clan Sumei. Behind her, there was an old man and several people with surging auras. Surprisingly, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure was among them. Are you all right? Sumei landed in front of Yi Zichen, visibly flustered. She asked about his well-being, but when she saw the chaos in the city, she asked, "Where are they? Where's Mu and Stark?" It seems they've fled, but judging from the lingering auras in the air, they haven't been gone for long. If we chase after them now, we might be able to catch up, said the elder behind Sumei. You? Yi Zichen frowned, then looked at the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. Venerable Numinous Treasure, why are you with Sumei? Where did you go earlier? No matter how I tried, I couldn't contact you. I might have to explain that to you later, said the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. At the same time, Sumei, who'd been looking Yi Zichen up and down, spoke up. You transcended? That's right, just now. Yi Zichen nodded, but his suspicions about Sumei only deepened. This girl seemed to know a bit too much. That's wonderful. Sumei let out a deep breath as the old man behind her spoke. The elder behind her said, Miss, if we don't catch up now, we won't make it in time. I got it. Let's go. With that, Sumei turned to leave, but Yi Zichen pulled her back. What are you going to do? We're going after those two god kings. This is our best chance to get rid of them. If we let them return to the god realm and replenish their divine energy, it'll be even more difficult to deal with them. I'll go with you. Although he didn't know how Sumei knew all this was a good chance to get rid of the god kings. No matter what, he couldn't miss it. In addition, he shouted at Zhou Wu. However, Zhou Wu still looked like a living dead. Miss. Chapter 1821. Before Yi Zichen could even finish his sentence, the elder by Sumei side shot towards Ji Yuan. Yi Zichen couldn't help but arch his brows at the old man's confidence. Even though he transcended in this era, he couldn't pinpoint God King Joy and God King Freedom's locations. Yet this old man could. Yi Zichen glanced at Sumei and the others. They seemed to have an indescribable understanding of the god race. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure was with them. Yi Zichen didn't recall them ever interacting with each other before. The people in the sky gradually drifted further and further away. Even Zhou Wu, a transcendent expert, didn't go with them. He simply stood there, staring blankly at the lifeless Divine Arbiter. There was no light in his eyes. Ji Yuan's safety was no longer important to him. He was still alive, but the moment he confirmed that the Divine Arbiter had no chance of survival, he was no different from being dead. Divine Arbiter, I've let you down. Zhou muttered the same words over and over again. He was filled with guilt towards the Divine Arbiter. In order to achieve transcendence, he'd slaughtered the Divine Arbiter's entire clan. What's more, after learning that the Divine Arbiter had lied to him out of goodwill, he was certain she'd betrayed him. In the face of the Divine Arbiter's questioning of his feelings, he'd abandoned his truest thoughts and attacked her in order to cover it up. Perhaps this was the heavens' punishment for him. He'd killed far too many people. Even the heavens couldn't bear to watch. So why was this the result of his punishment? He didn't have a heart, so he didn't feel any heartache. In the face of all this, he had no outlet for his emotions. It was this sort of silence that accompanied him and the divine arbiter. Yet, this sort of scene made him feel even heavier. She might still be saved. There was only a gentle breeze blowing in the chaotic city. Suddenly, an old man's voice could be heard. These words were like a spark, instantly igniting Zhou Wu's heart. He looked around frantically, looking for the person who had spoken, fearing that he was hallucinating. "I'm here." Suddenly, a cool breeze brushed past him. The black-robed hermit emperor stroked his beard and stood before Zhou Wu and the divine arbiter. The hermit emperor. Naturally, Zhou Wu was no stranger to the hermit emperor. He was the oldest sovereign emperor of the epic god race. Before Zhou Wu became famous, this old senior had already occupied a divine mountain. Seeing his appearance, Zhou Wu was stunned. However, his mood was also indifferent and depressed. He understood the hermit emperor very well. The hermit emperor was a divine doctor, and his medical skills were renowned throughout the three realms. However, it was precisely because he knew her too well that he was disappointed. No matter how great the hermit emperor's medical skills were, he didn't have the means to bring someone back from the dead. If possible, given the five elements' great emperor's benevolence and righteousness, the hermit emperor wouldn't have stood by and watched him die. Even so, the five elements' great emperor still hadn't appeared in front of him. The divine arbiter. Even if Zhou Wu was unwilling to believe it, he had to admit that she was dead. There was no miracle to speak of. "You're disappointed to see me." The hermit emperor smiled gently. He was always like this, giving off the feeling that he was a benevolent elder. "Hermit emperor, I acknowledge your medical skills, but the divine arbiter, I can keep her alive." The hermit emperor smiled. Zhou Wu had wanted to continue speaking, but he swallowed the words he was about to say. He abruptly raised his head and stared at the hermit emperor with trembling eyes. Do you trust in my medical skills?" "Of course I trust them, but you shouldn't be so hesitant right now." The hermit emperor gently patted him on the shoulder. "You want to keep her and her child alive, don't you?" "There's no need. As long as she..." To Zhou Wu, the divine arbiter's child was the main reason he'd woken her up. However, the divine arbiter's life was far more important than the child. If he wasn't here, the child wouldn't survive. As long as the divine arbiter was alive. The hermit emperor continued to smile, but said nothing. Zhou Wu paused for a few breaths, then knelt before the hermit emperor. "Hermit emperor, please. There's no need for such formalities. Besides, it's not like I don't need anything from reviving her for you," said the hermit emperor softly. "What do you want? As long as I have it." "No, even if I don't have it, You have it," said the hermit emperor without hesitation. "Speak. I want." The hermit emperor's lips quivered, then he smiled. "At this point in time, I might be tempted to take advantage of your misfortune, but I'll give it to you." Zhou Wu didn't even wait for the hermit emperor to finish. He agreed without hesitation. To him, the hermit emperor's request was dispensable. As long as the divine arbiter lived, he wouldn't hesitate to hand over his own life. "You don't need to explain. I'll give it to you. All I ask is that you keep your word and revive the divine arbiter." "Don't you trust my character?" "I trust you." His voice was as resolute as ever. Zhou Wu didn't want to offend the hermit emperor. This was his last hope, and he couldn't let it slip from his grasp. He gazed deeply at the divine arbiter. She was still as stunning as ever, but there wasn't the slightest hint of color on her cheeks. Instead, they were a chilling, deathly gray. The divine arbiter's smile echoed through his mind. Silently, Zhou Wu's lips curled up as well. He wanted to see that smile again. He wanted the opportunity to do so. "Wait for me." Zhou Wu exhaled deeply, then placed the divine arbiter on the flat ground, then walked up to the hermit emperor. "I'll give it to you right now." "Wait." Just as Zhou Wu was about to act, the hermit emperor reached out. Zhou Wu's heart clenched. His eyes brimmed with confusion and worry afraid the Hermit Emperor would go back on his word. "You don't need to worry about me going back on my word," said the Hermit Emperor. "This is an item that can only be encountered by chance. No one would give up on it." "Then why? I'm not asking for it for myself. I'm asking for it on behalf of someone else. Furthermore, I have to take it myself." "No problem." Zhou Wu didn't hesitate. He opened his sea of consciousness and closed his eyes. The Hermit Emperor couldn't help but be startled by such a decisive choice. Before coming here, the Hermit Emperor had considered that if Zhou Wu didn't give it to him, he'd take it by force. He absolutely had to obtain it. He never would have guessed things would turn out like this. Zhou Wu had agreed so easily and even cooperated with him. "It seems she really is important to you," said the Hermit Emperor. Chapter 1822. Within the spatial turbulence. God King Joy and God King Freedom shuttled through the spatial turbulence. For others, the spatial turbulence was a forbidden zone they couldn't enter no matter what. Even half-step transcendence experts like Gu Xuanda and Qing Li would get lost in the turbulence if they weren't careful, and their divine power would be drained to death. However, God King Joy and God King Freedom were only psychic bodies. As long as they maintained their ethereal form, they wouldn't have to worry about the spatial turbulence attacking them. This was the safest and most convenient way for them to return to their true bodies. "Yi Zichen, you belong to me. You belong to me." God King Joy gnashed her teeth and called out Yi Zichen's name. Yi Zichen's deception infuriated him. He swore he'd snatch Yi Zichen's soul and make him taste the punishment he deserved for lying. And Zhou Wu. At the thought of Zhou Wu's disobedience, God Monarch Joy clutched his soul tightly as though she wanted to crush it. Keep him alive. He's still useful. God King Freedom stopped God King Joy. God King Joy was already burning with fury, but his gaze darkened. "You, don't be so angry. I know you're pissed. You're not the only one. My meticulous plan failed, and I'm just as angry as you." God King Freedom's expression was solemn. "Then why did you stop me? Zhou Wu is still useful to us. He's already planning on rebelling against me." God King Joy snorted. "I don't like other people's disobedience, especially when it's a work of art I personally made. You only have yourself to blame, don't you?" God King Freedom glanced at him. "I've been watching. If you hadn't promised Zhou Wu to save that woman and then killed her, how could Zhou Wu possibly have disobeyed you?" It's all that era's Star Lord's fault." When she thought of Yi Zichen, God King Joy felt an unquenchable fury. She admired him so much, and even promised him she'd help him become a God King. This was a treatment no one had enjoyed in the past billions of years. But then, he'd lied to her and even schemed to steal Zhou Wu's memories. "That guy, I'll show him just how foolish his actions are." God King Joy roared. "I believe that you have the strength to do so," the Freedom Divine King said. With an arrogant snort, the God King of Pleasure didn't mention this again. "Why did all your plans fail? Didn't you say that your plans were very thorough?" Ha! Hearing that, the Freedom God King clenched his fists. His eyes flickered with a vicious light as he recounted everything that had happened to him. "I didn't expect the remnants of the Second Era to have such methods." Hearing Freedom God King's explanation, Joy God King had a look of surprise. "Those fellows are all troublesome fellows. We've been out of the God race for too long. The divine sense you split off has consumed a lot of your divine power. Just now I consumed a lot as well. We should go back." Divine King Joy wanted to say that saving Yi Zichen had cost her a lot of divine power. But when he remembered that he was the one who jumped into the trap, he didn't say anything. "If it weren't for the God race, I wouldn't have been able to replenish my divine power. There's no need to go through so much trouble to destroy an epic," the Freedom Divine King said fiercely. He had spent so much energy and time, only to have his plan ruined. One could imagine how he felt. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Kuei Lin and the others. In truth, he'd noticed them from the start, but he'd never had the time to ask. "These fellows, they can be considered my people," said Joy God King. "At first, I wanted to help Zhou Wu, but who would have thought they wouldn't do anything at all? Instead, they're shameless enough to follow us. But that's fine. We'll leave them as sacrificial pawns and let them play with those era bastards. Hey, Freedom God King warned. Just now, Joy God King hadn't transmitted her voice. Kuei Lin and the others heard her clearly. What's there to be afraid of? Even if they heard, they wouldn't dare say anything. Joy God King laughed disdainfully, then turned to Kuei Lin and the others. What do you think? Kuei Lin and the others lowered their gazes. When Freedom God King saw this, he knew that Joy God King had used some sort of condition to threaten them. That was just how the era was. They always left themselves with too many weaknesses. Freedom God King sneered disdainfully, then ignored Kuei Lin and the others. We'll reach the main body soon. I'm sure you know what to do when we get there. I don't need you to remind me, snorted Joy. Godly Monarch Pleasure snorted. It's easy to scare a few epic ants, even if I have little godly power left. The God-trapping formation. Within the formation, the era powerhouses rubbed their fists. It had been several hours since they'd left the era. They'd been trapped here all this time, so they didn't know what was going on in the era. Unfortunately, their most important family members were in the hands of the Outrealm gods. They couldn't do anything. At that moment, the two statuesque God Kings' eyes lit up. God King Joy in clown form licked his lips, his gaze sweeping over the era powerhouses. You're quite obedient. It seems your family will be spared from death. What did you do to era? Roared one of the powerhouses. What did I do? What else could I do? God King Joy shook his head with a smile, then waved a finger at them. No, you shouldn't be worrying about era, but them. Pointing at the captured people, God King Joy smiled. Since you've done well, I'm willing to give you a chance to let them go. Of course, I'm also giving you a chance to return to the era. Speak. Before that, I'd like you to meet an old friend. He waved his hand, and Kuei Lin and the others entered the God-sealing formation. When they saw them, the era powerhouses stared in shock. Kuei Lin's death had long since been publicized, and the Upheaval Alliance's intelligence department had confirmed it. But now, surprised, aren't you? Don't be. I brought them back to life. God King Joy's lips curved in an exaggerated smile. You've seen them, and I trust you're all old acquaintances, so there's no need to introduce yourselves. Kill them, and you can leave this place along with your family. Let me remind you, they're much stronger now than they were when they were alive. With that, God King Joy shot Kuei Lin and the others a look. Kuei Lin and the others lowered their heads and walked over to God King Joy. But at that moment, a black dagger suddenly appeared in Kuei Lin's hand. Before anyone could react, he plunged it into God King Joy's forehead, where her godhead was stored. Chapter 1823. The crowd gasped. The dagger, forged from an unknown material, sank effortlessly into God King Joy's forehead. Without another word, God King Joy slapped Kuei Lin's shoulder with all her might. The tremendous force dislocated Kuei Lin's left shoulder, but his right hand continued to grip the dagger and push. The intense pain caused God Monarch Pleasure's hand movements to slow down. Painful wails came out of his mouth and resounded through the entire Outer Realm void. Everything had happened too suddenly. Quite a few of the Outer Realm's experts had no idea what was going on. The ones in the inner circle wanted to rush forward, but several dangerous auras scared them away. Kuei Lin's old subordinates. The old subordinates of Kuei Lin were brimming with spiritual energy, and they were on the verge of self-detonation. If they wanted to, they could detonate themselves with a single thought. They could self-destruct in an instant. In such a small space like the God-trapping array, the power of the spiritual energy released was something that no one could resist. The great powers of the First Era hadn't anticipated this turn of events. God King Joy was Kuei Lin's resurrector, so Kuei Lin should have accepted her as his master. Who would have thought he'd suddenly turn on God King Joy? However, this was a delightful development for the First Era. Both Kuei Lin and God King Joy stood on the opposite side of the First Era. When they fought, the First Era's great powers were willing to sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. The funniest part of all came from God King Freedom. As a comrade, he should have helped God King Joy when she was injured. However, he hadn't done so. Instead, he'd watched everything unfold from the sidelines. Moreover, his eyes were filled with panic. Dying, eyes bloodshot, Kuei Lin pushed his black dagger toward God King Joy's forehead. The pain on God King Joy's face deepened. Using all his strength, he slammed his fist into Kuei Lin's chest. The tremendous force heavily injured Kuei Lin, sending him flying backward. His right hand separated from the dagger. Kuei Lin's chest was pierced by God King Joy's furious attack, but not a single drop of blood flowed from the bowl-sized wound. A faint smile spread across Kuei Lin's face. His injuries looked very serious. If it was anyone else, they might have already lost their breath, but he was different. The resurrected him could not be considered a real person at all. He was not afraid of being injured. He who had never thanked God Monarch Pleasure for resurrecting him wanted to thank her now. If he hadn't given himself this body, he wouldn't have been able to. He tasted the feeling of killing a god king. Kuei Lin, who'd been thrown back 100 meters, reappeared in front of God King Pleasure. He grabbed the dagger with his right hand and pushed. Crack! The crisp sound of glass shattering rang in everyone's ears. Upon hearing this, the war goddess of the Outer Realm god race raised her eyebrows slightly. The god kings under Yale, who were also god kings of destruction, also stared. They could not be more familiar with this shattering sound. It was the sound of a godhead shattering. To the Outer Realm divine race, the most important thing was the divine spark that they condensed. As long as their godheads remained intact, even if their fleshly bodies perished, they wouldn't truly perish. But if it was a godhead, therefore, to the experts of the Outer Realm God Clan, their protection of the godhead was far more important than their own bodies. But just now, God King Pleasure's godhead had shattered. It was hard to believe that a god king's godhead could shatter so easily. Kuei Lin's black dagger had sunk into the spot where the godhead had been. Only the shattering of a godhead could produce that crisp sound from between the brows. Could it be another god king had fallen? And the one who died was the oldest god king of the Outer Realm, God King Pleasure, who'd been around since the beginning of the era. Pleasure, one of Yale's overgods, tried to step forward, but the war goddess stopped him before he could take more than a few steps. From the look in her eyes, the Lord God read her meaning. Don't get involved. The Outer Realm God King was in such a predicament, but as a member of the Outer Realm, he couldn't help. He didn't understand, but he had to obey. Before coming, Yale had said that on this trip to the new era, the God Palace of Destruction had to obey the war goddess orders. Her orders were as good as Yale's. He silently retreated to his original position and watched God King Pleasure's pained wails. Don't be offside. The war goddess divine sense transmitted into the minds of the God Palace of Destruction's overgods. Even if you fight with God King Liberty here, you won't get a chance. Realization dawned on the overgods. Just as the war goddess had said, with God King Liberty here, they wouldn't get a chance. However, God King Liberty had no intention of interfering with God King Pleasure. Are we just going to watch God King Pleasure? One of the overgods was worried for God King Pleasure. We're just going to watch, the war goddess said decisively. God King Pleasure isn't on good terms with the God Palace of Destruction to begin with. I've come on Lord Yale's orders to bring you all here to enjoy the feast. As for other unnecessary matters, I won't let you do as you please without the God King of Destruction's orders. Plus, that black dagger in that person's hand looks familiar, so familiar that I can't help but think about it. Familiar? The overgods didn't understand. In terms of divine artifacts, epics would also have divine artifacts bestowed by gods. Many epics' divine artifacts were quite famous in the Outer Realms. Does she mean it looked like a god-given artifact? Don't you find it strange? The war goddess glanced at God King Liberty with a smile. How can the hardness of a godhead be destroyed in a short period of time? Moreover, how did he know the location of a godhead? And how did he know that destroying a godhead is a fatal blow to us Protoss? God King Liberty, as one of the 4 godly kings, even if he expends a lot of divine power, he can still finish off a soulless person in the blink of an eye. Why didn't he help? The war goddess' words hit the nail on the head. She believed that all the Outerium Protoss powerhouses here had similar doubts, but they didn't dare to connect the dots. Right now, the war goddess could be said to have pointed the question at God King Liberty. The over-gods of the God Palace of Destruction could not help but gulp. They glanced at God King Liberty and quickly looked away, afraid that he would notice. Then, they communicated through divine sense, their voices filled with fear. You mean, Chapter 1824. They couldn't help but find their behavior laughable. When the Divine King was killed, none of the nearly 1 million elites of the God race who came to the new era offered any help. He'd stood there indifferently, watching Kuei Lin's murder with his own eyes. What's going on with the gods? The great sage used his signature move. He stood on one leg like a golden rooster and placed his hand on his forehead to look around. The shock in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Kuei Lin's success in attacking God King Joy was unbelievable enough, but they couldn't understand why the outsiders hadn't stopped him. Who knows? Yang Jian shrugged. The other experts didn't understand either. They couldn't understand what the gods were doing. God Kings held great power in the outside. It should have been very important to them, but they couldn't understand why they'd been treated like this. Is there an internal conflict? The great sage muttered to himself. The others didn't reply, and he didn't expect them to either. Did you all hear that crisp sound? Asked one of the experts. The others nodded in agreement. The sound of God King Joy's godhead shattering wasn't soft, and they weren't deaf. How could they not have heard it? Do you know what it was? This guy looks like he's in pain, said one of the experts. The others didn't know. Gu Xuanda whispered, Godhead. The others looked in his direction. Everyone looked in his direction, and Gu Xuanda continued. The godheads are condensed by the true gods are between the eyebrows. I believe that some of us are also aware of it. The Ocean Empress, Emperor Bian, and the others nodded. Godheads did indeed condense between the eyebrows. Godheads needed nourishment, and that was the clearest part of a person's body. It was the best place for godheads to be nourished. Therefore, not only the godhead, but most of the bloodline power and other important things also appeared in between the eyebrows. Kuei Lin's dagger sank into God King Joy's forehead. You're saying his godhead shattered? Asked Emperor Bian. That's possible. Gu Xuanda nodded. Can godheads be destroyed? Just based on Kuei Lin's dagger? I don't know, said Gu Xuanda, shaking his head. Gu Xuanda shook his head gently and said, This is only my guess. As for the outcome, I'm not sure either. It's just that, judging from the various signs, it should be a shattered godhead. Then, he swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He didn't say them because he thought it was too impossible. As a spirit-focus expert, he was well aware of the importance of a godhead. Some people died, but as long as their godheads remained, they could obtain new life through the power of their godheads. Of course, not everyone could do this. It also required a high degree of compatibility with the godhead, as well as time to nourish it. If the compatibility wasn't high, then it wouldn't matter if he died, but the godhead would still remain in the world. But once a person's godhead was broken, they would lose all of their god force. One could imagine what would happen to a true god who had lost his god force. Bian found it hard to believe that a mighty divine monarch, an existence that shrouded the hearts of the people of their era like a nightmare, would die so easily. All of a sudden, someone recalled the Ocean Sovereign's telepathic message. Ocean Emperor, are you referring to now? No, the Ocean Sovereign replied. But this is a development that's beneficial to us. Let's just wait and see. The others nodded in agreement, then turned to God King Joy. At this moment, golden blood was flowing out of God King Joy's glabella. At his glabella, the black dagger was very glaring. God Monarch Joy's face was also filled with pain. His godhead had shattered. As the victim, he knew his own situation better than anyone else. His godhead had been shattered. The space between his brows clearly protected his godhead very well. However, when the dagger pierced the space between his eyebrows, it completely ignored his godhead's protection and directly came into contact with it. He was furious. How could Kuei Lin have attacked him? If he'd known, he'd held on to Kuei Lin's weak spot. But now none of that mattered. No matter what he had, Kuei Lin had killed him and destroyed his godhead. With his godhead shattered, his god force continued to leak out. In less than an hour's time, the energy accumulated in his godhead would leave him. Before that happened, he had many things to do. The most important of them all was, he grabbed the dagger in his forehead and yanked it out. As the dagger left his forehead, shards of godhead splashed out. Kuei Lin couldn't possibly have such a tool, ignoring the fact that Ji Yuan's forging skills hadn't reached such a level. Such a tool had clearly been forged for a god, and the forger had to have a deep understanding of them to be able to make it. In other words, it had come from the outside. The divine race had forged it. God King Joy held the dagger in his hand and flipped it around a few times. Suddenly, a mocking smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Golden divine power poured out of God King Pleasure's glabella like a golden radiance. He flipped the dagger around a few more times, then flicked it through Kuei Lin's head. Bang! There was almost no delay. As soon as the dagger pierced through, Kuei Lin collapsed to the ground. However, he seemed to have anticipated this outcome. Even in death, he still wore a smile. He'd done it. His long-cherished wish had been fulfilled, and he'd dragged a God King down with him. It was worth it. Your Excellency, Kuei Lin's old subordinates cried out, then charged at God King Joy without a care for their own safety. With a gentle wave of her hand, God King Delight reduced Kuei Lin's old subordinates to dust, scattering them into the depths of the Outrealm's void. The era's experts were stunned. This was the power of a God King. They'd never seen a God King's power before, but now they saw it with their own eyes. In his eyes, Imperial Lords were nothing more than lowly ants. With a wave of his hand, he'd pulverized a handful of them. Having dealt with Kuei Lin and his old subordinates, God King Joy glanced at the era's experts. They'd just witnessed the scene, but when they sensed God King Joy's gaze, their hearts shook. Fortunately, he only took a glance before retracting his gaze and turning his head to look at the Freedom Divine King silently. Stark, that was God King Freedom's name. The Pleasure God King stared at the Freedom God King. In an instant, violent divine power gushed out like a tide, and the golden radiance flowing out of her glabella became denser. You, why do you want to harm me? In an instant, the entire outer realm seemed to fall silent. Chapter 1825. Golden divine power flowed from between his brows and converged into a golden river. The gods of the extraterritorial god race were so shocked by the thunderous roar of the divine king that they lost their minds. What lingered in their hearts for a long time was the question of the Freedom Divine King. Why did he harm him? Could it be that Divine King Joy had fallen to such a state because of Divine King Freedom? Under the thunderous questioning, the gods of the Outer Realm god race could not help but have the same doubts. If that was really the case, why did the Freedom God King do this? The Outer Realm gods had one emperor and 4 kings. It seemed like the Outer Realm gods had a transcendent status in many planes, but that was only on the surface. Every god here knew how many planes coveted the Outer Realm god's position. Before the Outer Realm gods attacked the new era, they had been fighting in secret. In order to ensure that the Outer Realm god's position wouldn't be violated and that they could continue standing, they had no choice but to destroy all planes that could threaten them. The Divine Emperor wasn't at home all year round. He traveled to many planes and used his transcendent power to keep the other planes in line. The God Emperor wasn't in the clan all year round. He traveled to many planes, using his transcendent power to keep the other planes in line. The Divine Emperor wasn't at home all year round. He traveled to many planes and used his transcendent power to keep the other planes in line. They had to fight fiercely and make the other planes fear the power of the god race. Only in this way could those eager races give up the dangerous ideas in their hearts. They had to fight fiercely and make the other planes fear the power of the Outer Realm gods. Only then would the eager races give up their dangerous ideas. Under such circumstances, any Outer Realm god was a precious resource. Especially in the recent tens of thousands of years, the races of the other planes had developed rapidly, while the extraterritorial divine race's resources had dried up, causing the number of experts who could stand on their own to dwindle. The races of the other planes had developed rapidly in the last tens of thousands of years, but the Outer Realm gods' resources had dried up. The loss of any one of their godly monarchs could possibly bring about a rather dangerous situation to their Outer Realm god clan. Given his realm, killing those masters of the laws would be a piece of cake. He was worried that the master of the laws would retaliate against the Outer Realm gods. If so, the Outer Realm gods would have another strong enemy. It was also because the Outer Realm gods lacked god kings that the Divine Emperor had turned a blind eye to the God King of Destruction's bad habits. It was also because the god race lacked God King experts that the God Emperor turned a blind eye to the God King of Destruction's bad habits. Fortunately, the God King of Destruction only had his deity sealed. Even so, the God Emperor repeatedly begged the Master of the Laws not to spread the news. These gods were aware of the situation. The gods from the other epochs did not believe that the Freedom God King, one of the 4 God Kings, would not be unaware of the situation. In that case, why did he harm God Monarch Joy? Wasn't he worried that the god race, which had lost the Pleasure God King, would be devoured by other planes other than the god race? Stark, I'm asking you a question. God Monarch Joy was furious, but what was puzzling was that despite his rage, he did not attack God Monarch Freedom immediately. He was still questioning, as if the Freedom Divine King's explanation was very important to him. I don't understand what you mean. After a long time, Godly King of Freedom, Stark turned around. His eyes were filled with innocence and confusion as he shook his head in the face of Godly King of Pleasure's wrath. Kuei Lin is... Then, is it really that hard for you to speak the truth? His eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Stark, the God King of Freedom, with a bitter smile. That dagger was forged by the God King when you ascended to the God King position. The God King went to the dwarves to forge it for you. I, Godly King of Freedom, personally handed it to you, the Divine Emperor, and I personally engraved the inscription on the dagger for you. Godly King's eyes reddened, and tears shimmered in them. Godly power flowed out of his forehead like a golden sea, and Godly King was immersed in that golden sea. This throne remembers this dagger clearly. You don't understand what I'm saying? Stark, don't tell me that you can't tell me the truth before I die. Is it so hard for you to speak the truth? It's really... Yale's master gods were so shocked they couldn't form a complete sentence. They weren't the only ones. Stark's master gods looked at each other in bewilderment. The dagger belonged to the God King of Freedom. Just this sentence alone was enough to prove everything. Stark, I don't have any other requests. I just want to ask you, why did you do this? The people standing outside this epic are all your and Yale's people. I'm alone, and my godhead has been destroyed. I'm no match for you. I just want to know why. In the face of Godly King of Freedom's questions, the God King of Freedom kept a straight face and didn't say a word. The gods outside this epic were conflicted. From Godly King Joy's words, it was true that the God King of Freedom had framed him. However, the God King of Freedom still hadn't admitted it. If they didn't hear it from his own mouth, they'd rather believe he was lying. At this point in time, the truth was no longer important to these true gods. They wanted the God King of Freedom to remain silent. As long as he insisted it wasn't him, then it wasn't him. If he admitted it, the gods would be even more distressed. They were soldiers of the God Hall of Freedom, loyal to the God King of Freedom and the God Emperor. If Godly King Joy's godhead was destroyed because of the God King of Freedom, then it meant that the God King of Freedom was shaking the foundation of the God race. As soldiers of the God Hall of Freedom, how could they face such a thing? Should they view the God King of Freedom as a traitor? Or should they ignore their conscience and continue to be loyal to him? These were two difficult choices for them. In that case, it would be better for the God King of Freedom to remain silent. Stark, with his godhead destroyed, his godly power was draining at an alarming rate. In just a few short sentences, both the gods from the outer realms and the great powers of this epic could feel that his power had been reduced by at least 1/10. The loss of godly power made his body weak, and his anger decreased by a lot. He was like a dying person who was about to take a curtain call. His eyes were filled with nostalgia, and he smiled bitterly as if he was telling a story. 20 million years ago, the God King of Darkness fell in the planar war, and the God race's combat power plummeted. The God Emperor and I struggled to support the God race on the verge of collapse until you and destruction broke through. Do you know how happy the God Emperor and I were back then? With a light hook of his finger, the black dagger in the void fell into his palm. Remember what I told you when I gave you the dagger? To shoulder the God race's future. You are all the God race's future hope. I was afraid that you would think that I was too old and would affect your status. After that, I almost never stayed in the race and let you and destruction develop. Chapter 1826. The gods of the Outer Realm God race were moved by God, King Joy's outpouring of emotions. Anyone who was plotted against would be furious, and the only thing they could think of was revenge. The God King of Pleasure was also very angry, but as time passed, his anger gradually subsided. He was already certain that the Freedom Divine King was the mastermind behind the scenes. Even if the gods were unwilling to believe it, they were inclined to believe what God King Joy said. It was in such a situation that he still did not attack God King Freedom. Was he afraid of God King Freedom and his many gods? Was that possible? God King Joy was the oldest God King in the God race, the number one person below the God Emperor. Even the God Emperor had said more than once that if they fought with their lives, the God Emperor's chances of winning were less than 60%. Yet, such a person cared about these gods. The only possibility was that he did not want to weaken the God race's power. Even at such a time, he still placed the righteousness of the God race at the forefront. Such breadth of mind. Many gods were shaken, feeling that they had wronged God King Joy. For the past few million years, God King Joy had not been working properly in the God race. He was always shuttling between different planes. Rumor had it that he was moody and liked to destroy small planes that did not pose a threat to the God race to gain pleasure. There were also rumors that he relied on his experience and strength to be unruly. As a result, there were fewer and fewer people in God Palace of Joy. Just like now, there was no one from God Palace of Joy. However, from God King Joy's behavior and words just now, they felt that they had wronged him for so many years. He was a righteous person who placed the safety of the God race at the forefront. For some reason, even though they were from God Palace of Freedom, some of them had started to despise God King Freedom's evil deeds. Was it really that difficult to speak the truth? Stack. God King Joy was still shouting at the top of his lungs, wanting to hear the unimportant reason from God King Freedom. Whether God King Freedom admitted it or not, his godhead was already broken. He could not stop the loss of his divine power, which meant that he would only die. What a smart person. At that moment, Gu clan leader Gu Xuanda whispered in everyone's sea of consciousness. The others subconsciously looked in his direction. Qingli also frowned. Stack. All of them. Gu Xuanda clasped his hands behind his back as he looked at the two of them, who were almost within reach of each other. Stark Silence is very smart, but his methods are actually much more brilliant than his. Based on what he said just now, some of Stark's subordinates are already wavering. Incite them, the Ocean Sovereign asked. Gu Xuanda nodded and glanced at the two divine kings. I understand these Outerium God Kings too well. No one can truly place the overall situation of the Outerium God race before their personal grudges. The only one who can do this is the God King. He is the only respectable ruler who is completely considerate of the God race. Actually, I'm rather curious as to why Stark set them up. Qingli frowned as she looked ahead. No matter how I look at it, there's no need for Stark to scheme against them. Even if he wants to take over the Overlord God region, it's definitely not the one who will affect his ascension. Stark framed them. Upon hearing Qingli's words, Gu Xuanda smiled mysteriously. The truth isn't as simple as we think. The other Almighties were dumbfounded. From Gu Xuanda's words, they could understand the deeper meaning behind his words. The Freedom Divine King actually didn't want to frame them, but he couldn't possibly be the one who set them up and let Kuei Lin shatter his godhead, causing him to die. No matter what, he wouldn't do such a thing, right? Gu Xuanda only smiled mysteriously when faced with the Almighty's puzzlement. Just keep watching. The Joy Divine King's words caused the attitudes of the Outer Realm gods to change. They all admired the Joy Divine King's righteousness and despised the Freedom Divine King even more. Moreover, the situation in the Outer Realm wasn't good to begin with. The Freedom Divine King had killed a Divine King who had pioneered the God race's territory because of a personal grudge. Comparing the two was like comparing heaven and earth. Now, they all hoped that the one whose godhead was shattered was either the Freedom Divine King or the Joy Divine King would snatch the Freedom Divine King's godhead to prolong his life. Otherwise, it would be the Freedom Divine King, who liked to stab others in the back. They didn't know what kind of outrageous things he would do in the future. Stack, won't you tell me even if I beg you? The Joy Divine King's eyes were filled with pleading. Little did she know that the Freedom Divine King, who had never responded to her, was actually building a tunnel from the new era back to the God race. The pitch-black door appeared in everyone's sight. The Freedom Divine King ignored the Joy Divine King and said to the gods from the Freedom Divine Palace, "Return to the God race." To his surprise, only less than 30% of the gods chose to go to the tunnel. Looking at the gods' gazes, the Freedom Divine King couldn't help but smile bitterly and nod at the Joy Divine King. "You're really a senior. Your methods are brilliant. Stack, don't call my name. I feel disgusted." The Freedom Divine King looked straight at him and scoffed. "I didn't respond because I wanted you to leave a good impression in the gods' hearts. But now, it seems like if I don't tell you, the subordinate that I've painstakingly nurtured will leave me." "What are you talking about?" The Freedom Divine King frowned. "You're the one who's talking." The Freedom Divine King pointed at the dagger in the Joy Divine King's hand, his brows furrowed in anger. "You clearly didn't play your trick and ended up in this state, yet you're throwing dirty water on me. You're really quick-witted. You're using words to decorate your great image and incite my subordinates. What nonsense are you spouting?" "Nonsense!" Freedom Godly King glared at Pleasure Godly King and shouted, "You dare say that this dagger is mine? Do you dare swear to your soul, to the master of the laws who's always watching over this land, that this dagger is mine?" "It's clearly your own. Why do you want it now? You said that the dagger is mine. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Aren't you preparing to seize my godhead? Because you're very clear that only my godhead is able to prolong your life in the God King realm." The crowd was in an uproar. Chapter 1827. No one had expected the truth to be like this. The almighty beings of the era naturally believed what Gushwanda said about the authenticity of the two Divine Kings' words. Gushwanda's confirmation stunned the Ocean Emperor and the others for a long time. Freedom Godly King's silence gave Pleasure Godly King an absolute advantage. From a perspective of the epic emperors as bystanders, they subconsciously favored Pleasure Godly King. What he said was too real. Whether it was his tone or his expression, it could be said that he had reached the pinnacle. Even they were delighted by the deity king's deception, let alone the gods from the outer realms who were in the middle of the game. "Then I don't understand." Yang Jian furrowed his brows and stroked his chin. "If that dagger was God King Pleasure's weapon, why did it end up in Kuei Lin's hands? And why did Kuei Lin use it to shatter his godhead? Is there something wrong with his brain to commit such a suicidal act? You need to see your brain." Faced with Yang Jian's confusion, the great sage pursed his lips in disdain and pointed at his head. "Isn't it obvious? The clown wants to use Kuei Lin to kill Freedom God King. However, Kuei Lin betrayed us and used this dagger to shatter his godhead. What a F***king idiot." Yang Jian was speechless. Who knows? The great sage spread his hands in confusion. This kind of situation definitely needed to be arranged properly. God Monarch Pleasure had gone overboard. It's General Ning. The enemy understood the enemy best. See, the Arch was an old adversary of Kuei Lin's, so she knew a thing or two about why he'd attacked her. When Kuei Lin attacked God King Pleasure, he mentioned General Ning. Unsurprisingly, God King Joy was using this to blackmail Kuei Lin. It's just that he's sensitive to people. He still knows too little. He lost because he doesn't understand people's hearts. The other emperors nodded in agreement. Anyone who knew Kuei Lin knew of General Ning, who stood by his side. They more or less knew about the conflict between General Ning and Kuei Lin. All of you are right. Gu Xuanda chimed in. However, it doesn't matter why Kuei Lin attacked them. What's important is that he needs Stark's godhead to prolong his life. Kuei Lin's performance gives him an absolute advantage. Stark is here. Even if I tell the truth, I can tell from the eyes of those gods that they don't believe me at all. Then why don't you go and prove it for him? Qingli giggled. Do I have to be so kind to them? Gu Xuanda was speechless. Both of them are fighting to the death, but it's only beneficial for us. Don't forget that our weakness is still in their hands. Maybe we can take this opportunity to break the current stalemate. Don't forget our daughter. The child is still in their hands. Daughter, Qingli blinked innocently, and only after a long while did she come to a realization. That does seem to be the case. The smile on Qingli's face was withdrawn after her words sounded, and she spoke in an uncharacteristic manner. These guys are too hateful. It would be better if they were all beaten to death. Mother is going to die from anger. The great monarchs fell silent. In the past, the ancient race was transcendent, so they didn't have much contact with these two half-step transcendents. As time passed, they increasingly felt that these two transcendents were really weirdos. However, the great emperors didn't dare to say anything because their realms were higher than theirs. Right in front of them, the verbal confrontation between Divine King Joy and Divine King Freedom was still ongoing. Just as Gu Xuanda and the other great emperors had expected, the Divine King of Joy, who had perfectly portrayed the magnanimous Divine King, Li Tianlan in advance, did not have an absolute advantage after the Divine King of Freedom revealed the truth. However, judging from the expressions of the surrounding gods, he had won the trust of most of them. At the end of the day, Divine King Freedom could only blame himself for being too hypocritical. In other words, when the situation first started, he didn't expect Divine King Joy to be so vicious. He knew that the stars left behind from the Second Era were chasing after them. He wanted to return to the gods as soon as possible, so he focused on building the space tunnel. However, he missed the best opportunity to refute. Divine King Joy had portrayed his image almost perfectly. Anyone would think that he was a hero who cared about the gods and knew how to give in to his people and country. Faced with Divine King Joy's questioning, Divine King Freedom's silence made him look like a crafty villain. Under the strong influence of this impression, Divine King Freedom Stark went to reveal the truth, but it was too late. Suspicious gazes lingered around Stack. Only when he sensed this scene did he realize something was wrong in his heart. He had overestimated his image in the hearts of the gods from the Divine Palace. It was also this overestimation that caused him and Divine King Joy to be at a disadvantage. It also caused the situation to become irreversible. Despicable. Stark's face darkened. His voice exploded in Divine King Freedom's sea of consciousness. How can you say that I'm despicable? Haven't you grown after being a divine king in the outer realm for so many years? It's fine. I'll teach you a lesson and let you know that the world of the outer realm gods isn't as beautiful as you think. However, this lesson might cost you your life. In the voice transmission, its words were accompanied by playfulness and mockery. He had won. From the eyes of the gods from the outer realm, he knew that he had won the confrontation with Divine King Freedom. His heart was finally at ease. Now, he didn't need to worry about the consequences of snatching Divine King Freedom's godhead. Even if he tried to snatch it now, he was confident that at least half the people would side with him. When he returned to the divine race and the divine emperor questioned him, he could say that he had been forced by circumstances. The gods of the divine palace of liberty could also testify for him. As for the other three divine kings, the one who gave him the most headaches was Divine King Freedom. He was a city general and had fought his way up from low god to high god, then to over god. If he wanted to deal with him, he had to do it alone. That was why he'd chosen to accompany Divine King Freedom to the new era, all for the sake of killing Stark. That was why he'd given Kuei Lin the dagger. He'd wanted Kuei Lin to crush Divine King Freedom's godhead while he was off guard. He hadn't expected something to happen in the middle of the plan and put him in a predicament, but the result was good. Now he could legitimately take Divine King Freedom's godhead and get rid of this thorn in his side. He'd also effectively cut off the divine emperor's arms. Once he was done with him, Yale's divine sea would be sealed. He'd be finished in the blink of an eye. As for divine King Ob's of emotion, he was just a fellow who could manipulate the emotions of others. His combat experience was in the negatives. He'd always been curious as to how such a person could become a divine king, and for millions of years at that. It wouldn't take much effort to deal with him. After that, Chapter 1828. He had lived for too long. Joy God King's deep eyes gazed at Song Xiao. The feeling of being baptized by the passage of time was reflected in his eyes. God King, the position that countless true gods dreamed of. Joy God King was born for it. The long passage of time had blurred his memories of the past. He could still vaguely remember that when he opened his eyes, he was lying on the cold jade bed in the Joy God Palace. White, icy air surrounded him as he walked out of his room in a daze. What greeted his eyes was chaos. There were no living creatures. In the entire palace, he could only see himself. He couldn't remember how long he had been sitting in front of the palace. There was no day or night in the chaotic world. He just stared quietly until a golden light appeared in front of him. That light split the chaos, separating heaven and earth. A tall and sturdy figure carried a golden axe on his shoulder. Behind him, there was a dazzling brilliance that elongated his shadow. Even though he had never seen light before, his eyes still felt a piercing pain. After a long time, he finally knew that was light. The burly man took a few steps to stand in front of him. Noticing his presence, he seemed to be very happy. He smiled warmly, patting Joy God King, who was still very young at that time, and said something to him. From now on, you will be the Joy God King. You will bestow the path of joy to all living beings. Yes, he was born a God King, but the title of joy was given to him by that man. That man was the God Emperor. It was also that man who patted his shoulder a few times that made him, who didn't know anything, suddenly have some other emotions. After a long time, he finally knew. That was responsibility. He, who had never seen other creatures, was also very excited when he saw that man. He could feel the closeness between the two of them. He was so excited that he wanted to talk to that man, but after patting his shoulder, the man smiled and left. Before leaving, he told him that he would have many companions in the future. Just as he said, the joyous God Palace had inexplicably gained a lot of people. He didn't know where they came from, but he felt very happy with companions around him. He felt that all of this was given to him by that man. He wanted to repay that man, so he worked hard to bestow the path of joy to all living beings. He had always been looking forward to meeting that man, but when they really met, he knew. That man was the divine emperor. They had a superior and subordinate relationship, but it didn't matter to him. The divine emperor was his benefactor, allowing him to see a light that he had never seen before, allowing him, who was lonely, to have many people serving him. Even though those people were very respectful to him, at least the divine palace was not as empty as it used to be. He worked even harder to pass on the great Tao of pleasure, until he witnessed the birth of a baby with his own eyes. He, who had never seen a new life, was very curious about the birth of this little fellow. He stayed in that plane for 2 years until the baby learned to walk. He also heard words that he had never heard before. Mummy. It was also from then on that he knew the birth of any life was related to the existence of a mother. He envied the harmonious family of 3 and couldn't help but have a question that he had never had before. How was he born in this world? Him? Does he have a mother? The divine emperor? He must know. When he thought of this, the divine king of pleasure stopped his preaching journey and returned to the divine race like a meteor. He waited for 3 whole months before seeing the divine emperor. He asked this question expectantly, but in the end, you don't need to know this. You only need to know that you are the divine king of pleasure and that you bestow joy to all living beings. This was what the divine emperor said to him. His tone was very gentle. If an ordinary person heard this, they might think that the divine emperor was as gentle as an older brother. But to the divine king of pleasure, he had never felt the warmth of a family. The divine emperor's answer was not gentle to him, or rather, He didn't know what it meant to be as gentle as an older brother. To him, he didn't answer. He didn't ask further because he had already lived for several tens of thousands of years. He was no longer a child and knew that even if he asked, he wouldn't get an answer. He began to search for it himself. He returned to the plane of that family of three and stayed there for several tens of thousands of years. He had witnessed with his own eyes the continuation of the family of three, the birth of new lives, and the passing of old age. He watched as the family of three gradually became a small local family, watched as the children bustled about, watched as the elders were either strict or kind, laughed. For some reason, the divine king of pleasure felt his heart empty. After a long time, he found out it was called loneliness. Loneliness was like a demon that constantly hollowed out his heart. He became hysterical and kept asking himself why he couldn't remember who his mother was. To fill the void in his heart, he came into contact with art. It was a very kind old sculptor. The divine king of pleasure felt the emptiness in his heart being filled, but how could the void of familial love be filled by a single sculpture? Later, he went to question the old mother who showed him the birth of new lives. At that time, the woman was already a peak expert of that plane, but she couldn't answer him. Later, he killed her, her children and husband, and the entire family began to take revenge on him. They cursed him as a demon, but they forgot that a long time ago, they worshipped the divine king of pleasure as a celestial being and named their children by the divine king of pleasure. What made the divine king of pleasure strange was that they all knew that provoking him would only result in death, but they still fought him with all their might. After a long time, he found out this was called familial love. Was it familial love? The divine king of pleasure sneered, his expression ferocious. Jealousy could change a person beyond recognition. He was jealous of these people and their beautiful families. He was jealous that they had parents and children. He was jealous that they knew where they were born and where they would die. He massacred the people of that entire plane, including the old sculptor who gave him a taste of art. Little did he know, this kind of massacre made him feel a rare sense of joy. It got out of hand. Through the 6 lands, no plane was spared. He became more and more crazy, even alarming the God Emperor. When the God Emperor questioned him why he did this, he asked the God Emperor where his family was. The God Emperor was silent, but the divine king of pleasure felt like he knew everything. He didn't ask again, just smiled indifferently and left. But from that moment on, a seed was planted in his heart. The God Emperor. He was determined to be the God Emperor. Chapter 1829. He looked at the gods of liberty, divine palace, and saw the emotions in their eyes. It could not be said that the emotional divine king was useless. At least in the current situation, if pleasure divine king was the emotional divine king, these gods' performance will be much more exciting under the control of his emotional great Tao. But it did not matter. These gods were still suppressing their thoughts and did not dare to express them. Pleasure divine king was confident that in the next few minutes, he could completely mobilize the emotions of these gods who could not clearly express their opinions. The divine king of freedom, who was in the void, glared at him fiercely. Don't look at me like that. The more you look like that, the more those gods who don't know the truth will doubt you. His pleased smile lingered in the Liberty Divine King's sea of consciousness. However, the Liberty Divine King did not know how to refute him. Just as he said, when he looked at him fiercely, the gazes of those gods became even more unfriendly. After all, these were all the gods of his divine palace. They were his subordinates that he had nurtured with great care. If these people stood on the opposite side now, even if he could kill him in the future, these old subordinates would no longer be loyal to him. Competing for the position of divine emperor required sufficient military strength. He was not willing to give up these elite subordinates. Stop struggling. The outcome has been decided. With just a few words from me, these gods might leave your divine palace and become my people. Just hand over your godheads to me. When I register as divine emperor, the Liberty Divine King's expression changed drastically. He stared at Pleasure Divine King. Your goal is the position of divine emperor. Pleasure Divine King could not help but raise his eyebrows when he saw Liberty Divine King Stark's astonishment. He still needed to maintain his current expression to win the favor of those gods. However, from Stark's gaze just now, he could see what this guy wanted to hide. You also want the position of Divine Emperor? When I pushed for you to be the Divine King, you refused several times. I thought you were not interested in power. I really didn't expect that Liberty Divine King. You're also not loyal to the Divine Emperor. I really don't know how the Divine Emperor who pushed for you to be the Divine King would feel when he finds out. I didn't think that, Stack denied flatly. In fact, Stark really didn't have much ambition in the beginning. His parents were also very ordinary gods. Ever since he was a child, his dream was to become a high god. That way, he would not have to work as hard as his parents. He would be able to live the life he wanted. His dream was to become a high god. That way, he would not have to work as hard as his parents. He would be able to live the life he wanted. 17 years old. For some reason, although he didn't come from a good family, he broke through to become a mid-god at the age of 17 and became the most outstanding genius in their city. His parents were proud of him, and he grew up under the expectations of everyone. Before the age of 30, Stark had become a high god. His monstrous growth attracted the attention of the Divine Emperor. The Divine Emperor invited him to work in the Divine Palace, but his childhood dream made him refuse the invitation. He didn't want to be tied down. He wanted to be free. But sometimes, living was out of one's control. After rejecting the Divine Emperor's invitation, he was assigned to serve in the Dark Divine Palace's army. At that time, he felt like a caged bird. He wanted to break free from the shackles, until he became a main god. But because of his experience in the army, he heard a lot of regrets from his comrades. When they entered the army, less than 10% of them really liked the military life. Most of them did it to make a living or because of their parents' requests. Some of them wanted to be heroes, and some wanted to be priests. At that time, they all envied Stack because they didn't have his talent. When Stack broke through to main god, they all sincerely wished him well. Because the army couldn't assign a main god, he finally regained his freedom. Stack left. Although he was reluctant, he couldn't bear to be tied down for one more second. Good times didn't last long. At that time, there was another genius in the same batch as him, Yale of the Northern God Clan. Stack and Yale were given the title of the Twin Stars of the Divine Clan. After 100 years, Yale became the God King of Destruction of the Northern God Clan and oversaw the Divine Palace of Destruction. At that time, Stack also had the qualifications to sit on the Divine King's throne. But he wanted freedom, so he didn't deliberately show his strength until the Divine Emperor found him. The Divine King of Darkness left behind the Divine Palace of Darkness was still controlled by the main gods. The Divine Emperor deliberately pushed Stack to become the new Divine King of the Divine Palace of Darkness. He refused several times. He felt that the task of becoming the Divine King was too heavy. Ever since he was young, he wanted to live freely and didn't want to be bound by so many rules. In the end, he still gave in. He gave in to the Divine Emperor's oppressive policies, partly because of his own thoughts. He felt that the Divine Clan was currently in a vicious cycle. The gods couldn't do what he wanted and only made certain choices because they were forced by the situation. At that time, the Divine Palace of Freedom was established. He wanted to turn the situation around. He thought that the Divine King could do it, but he was wrong. He gradually felt powerless. In the grand environment of the celestial race, his strength was frail, even though he was a god king. From then on, he felt an emotion that never appeared before in his heart. Ambition. Divine kings couldn't, but divine emperors could. Divine emperors were the supreme beings of the Divine Clan. They had the status of controlling the entire Divine Clan. As long as he could become the Divine Emperor, wouldn't the freedom he proclaimed be realized? These were unknown, but it was worth a try. But the Divine Emperor's realm was too high. Until you also found the Divine Emperor's weakness? It ignored Stark's denial and continued to speak. Silence. Stack remained silent, but his heart was in turmoil. He also knew the Divine Emperor had always been the supreme being of the Divine Clan. His realm was so high that even the Divine Kings couldn't compare. Standing next to the Divine Emperor, he was like an insurmountable mountain. One would never be able to see through him, but he could see through you with just a glance. The only thing one could do was look up to him. No one would dare to rebel against such a divine emperor. The Freedom Divine King was the same. He didn't even dare to think about competing for the divine emperor's throne. Chapter 1830. Freedom. All this time, Stark had been pursuing freedom. He wanted to build a kingdom of freedom in the god race, so that the gods could do what they wanted to do and live according to their hearts. After learning about the God King's weakness, he had always kept this secret in his heart. He silently trained his subordinates, waiting for the moment when he was overthrown and seized power. But he also knew. Stark thought that this secret was only known to him. The shock in his eyes involuntarily flowed out. Stark wanted to hide it, but in the face of such an impact, he couldn't remain calm. "Hey, you're not good at hiding your expression." His voice once again appeared in the Freedom God King's sea of consciousness. "There's nothing to hide. There's only you and me in this net of consciousness. The other main gods and gods can't enter our communication at all. To be honest, your luck is really good. This seat has known the god race since it was first established. It took me millions of years to learn about his weakness, but you, a new kid of the god race, also know about it. But you're too greedy. How long has it been since you ascended the throne? And you already want the God King's position. Your ambition is too great." His voice lingered in the sea of consciousness. In his anger, Stark no longer communicated through voice transmissions. Instead, he directly shouted, "What qualifications do you have to comment on me?" Outside the epic, whether it was the gods of the god race or the almighty of the epic, they couldn't help but be startled. No wonder his and Stark were silent for so long. It turned out that they were communicating with their divine senses. Hearing that, his heart flashed with a smile. Then, his face was full of bitterness. "This seat just wants to comfort you before I die. The god race is the place where billions of gods live. You can't continue to make mistakes just because you're greedy for the God King's position." Stark pointed his finger at his god, his heart violently contracting. He had lost. After his god gained the upper hand and said such words, Stark knew that he had lost the battle of words with his god. Greedy for the God King's position. When the gods of the god race heard this, their emotions were completely stirred. After a short moment of shock, their faces instantly changed. Those gods who had been intimidated by the majesty of the Freedom God King gradually retreated from the door, looking at Stark fiercely. "Freedom God King, you want to rebel?" Someone shouted from the crowd, and then someone else shouted back. "Deity King Joy, please make the final move and eliminate this scum for the celestial race." "Shut up. Lord Liberty wouldn't do such a thing. This is completely slandering him." Someone in the Divine Palace who was completely loyal to Stark retorted. "What slander? Lord's heart is as big as the sea. It's Stark. I've long felt that Stark was a cunning person. He beat people up. Please, shut up, you traitor." Before the deity could finish his words, Stark's loyal soldier had already slashed down with his saber. His bloody head separated from his neck, instantly intensifying the conflict between the die-hard loyalists and the traitors. Fight for freedom. Fight for the God Clan. The gods of the God of Liberty Palace were divided into two factions fighting each other. Stack's heart was bleeding as he watched from a void. Those who could be incited by him would probably change sides when the godly emperor's regime was overthrown in the future. He was bleeding because of the loyal gods. These gods were all his precious treasures. Every time someone fell, his heart would ache a little more. Stack's eyes widened like bronze bells. The divine power in his body turned into a terrifying storm that swept outside the era. Standing in the storm, he laughed softly. At this time, he finally didn't need to disguise his expression anymore. The gods who were already fighting wouldn't pay attention to him. He could comfortably enjoy the joy of victory. He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Forget it. I'll fight for the celestial race one last time." These words were naturally meant for the gods to hear. However, as he spoke, his divine sense transmission appeared in Stack's sea of consciousness. "I indeed don't have the right to comment on you. Unfortunately, your fight for the godly emperor's throne is over. He glanced at the gods of the divine palace who were busy fighting and brushed the corner of his mouth with his finger. I still have to thank you for cultivating such a group of cute subordinates for me. I'll also accept your godhood. Boom. The golden sea of divine power suddenly stretched out a huge hand that covered the sky. This hand was completely formed by the power of the godhood. When it fell, the void outside the era shook violently. Stack's eyes were sharp as he snorted angrily. I'm afraid you don't have the ability. How did it turn out like this? Looking at the gods fighting around them, the main gods under Yale didn't know what to do. They came here to destroy the era. The era wasn't destroyed, but there was internal strife among them. The gods were killing each other, and the two godly kings were also fighting. Let's go. At this time, the war goddess looked coldly at the people fighting. When someone approached her, she didn't hesitate to end the poor god's life. The other main gods frowned slightly. Their eyes flickered with hesitation. What? Do you want to join in as well? No. But? There's no but. The mission to destroy the era has failed. You are Lord Yale's most precious subordinates. I won't let anything happen to you. Now, listen to my orders and return to the celestial race. That dagger. Return to the celestial race with me. I don't want to repeat myself for the third time. The war goddess's long and narrow eyes flashed with unquestionable majesty. When the main gods met her gaze, they couldn't help but not dare to look back. They slowly nodded and followed behind her. They were sure that the war goddess knew something they didn't. That dagger. Actually, as long as the war goddess said who the owner of the dagger was, then they would be able to tell who was right and who was wrong, and they could help one side. If the war goddess didn't say, they wouldn't know. If they let things continue like this, both sides would suffer, and the celestial race's national strength would be greatly weakened. They didn't understand why the war goddess made such a choice, but they couldn't find any problems with her words. In such a chaotic situation, even the main gods would find it hard to protect themselves. If something really happened, Lord Yale might really get angry, and he might even blame the war goddess. Chapter 1831. The Outside's Internal Strife. When the true gods who were maintaining the god-trapping array saw this scene, their hearts trembled. They could no longer maintain the same frequency of the god-trapping array, causing the god-trapping array to lose its effect. Eat this. Before the great sage's staff could land, Yang Jian swung his blade, gathered his strength, and broke the formation. Don't shout as soon as you swing your staff. It's a waste of time. With that, Yang Jian dashed towards the West Sea's third princess. The other experts hurried to their loved ones as well. Zixia, Jizun. Fairy Zixiao threw herself into the great sage's arms and sobbed. Just now, she truly felt as if she'd been separated from Jizun forever. For the sake of the new era, she'd set aside their love affair. But now that the crisis was over, she was no longer a bargaining chip the outsiders used to threaten the great sage. She returned to his arms, and her emotions surged like the tide. He looked around and saw that the other great emperors had brought their loved ones back. Let's go back to the new era. Gu Xuanda and Gu Luolin stood by his side. They'd been trapped outside the new era for far too long. They'd always been worried about the new era situation. Now, taking advantage of the outsiders' internal strife, the great emperors were eager to rush back to the new era. Should we seize this opportunity to take them down? Asked Yang Jian, carrying the third princess on his back. The way he saw it, this was an absolutely perfect opportunity. They could take advantage of the outsiders' internal strife to fish in troubled waters and whittle down the outsiders' overall strength. Especially the two god kings up there. They might even have a chance to do something big. Don't be silly. The third princess is still here. Aren't you afraid those stupid outsiders will hurt her? Sneered the great sage. That's right. Let's go back to the new era, said Lu Jing, the 17th Highness of the Four Directions Palace. Strangely enough, both Lu Jing and the dragon race's Xia Kiki should have been inside the Divine Time artifact. Yet they've been captured and brought here. If Yi Zichen were here, he'd definitely be puzzled. The other great emperors nodded as well. It might be an opportunity for them. Even if they didn't take action, the two parties would still fight to the death. It wouldn't make much difference whether they were there or not. Furthermore, this kind of battlefield was not something that ordinary people could participate in. Their relatives were rarely able to participate in this war. Bringing these people along was also a burden for them. If he really wanted to fish in troubled waters, it wouldn't be too late to return after sending them back and understanding the situation of the Great Era. The Ocean Sovereign and the Jade Lake Palace Master are not back yet. Just then, the Dragon Emperor of the Dragon Race looked around. Almost all the great emperors had gathered here, except for the Ocean Sovereign and the Jade Lake Palace Master. He looked over to where the gods were fighting and saw the Ocean Empress carrying Shue Bebe and the Jade Lake Palace Mistress weaving through the crowd. You guys go back first. I'll go take a look, Gushwanda said to the crowd. He could tell from the great emperor's eyes that they were still hesitant. Don't think too much. Don't you believe me? The situation in the new era might be even worse, so you need to go back and provide assistance as soon as possible. Of course we trust you, Clan Leader Gu. In that case, we'll go back first. After the emperors and almighty figures from the various races left, Qingli looked rather worried. Gushwanda smiled and patted her head before pinching Gulolin's little face. When you go back, tell my father why he can't even keep an eye on his granddaughter. Be careful. Don't worry. Gushwanda chuckled, then turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the place where the gods were fighting. What an exciting fight. Along the way, Gushwanda would kill a few from time to time. He didn't favor anyone. After killing the Freedom Divine King, he would go and kill the Joy Divine King. In short, it was a fair fight. The Ocean Sovereign and the Jade Lake Palace Master didn't pay as much attention to the balance between the two sides. As long as someone appeared in front of them, they would kill them regardless of their numbers. From their expressions, it was clear that they were panicking. They weren't panicking because they were trying to fish in troubled waters. Ocean Sovereign, stop killing. Let's go back. Gushwanda landed beside the Ocean Sovereign and the Jade Lake Palace Master. He killed the gods that were rushing toward him and said at the same time. The Ocean Sovereign clenched her teeth and said, No, Hong Hong and Momo are gone. The battle between the Joy Divine King and the Freedom Divine King was much more exciting than the gods on the ground. The battle between the two was like a comet crashing into Earth. The frequency of the collision couldn't be seen with the naked eye. When looking at the sky, only a few golden lights could be seen. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded in the sky. Two golden lights separated and landed in two different places. Ha! There was a broken divinity hanging above its head, and its divine power was constantly flowing out. As the divine power flowed out, its aura was also weakening. However, its aura didn't weaken at all. On the other hand, the Freedom Divine King, the godhead above its head, was dim, and its body was covered in terrifying wounds. How are you going to compete with me? Just give up and hand over the godhood. Once I ascend to the throne, you'll get a share of the credit. Hey, if not, what if not? Interrupted Stark coldly. You want to say that if it weren't for the fact that you split your divine thoughts too much and consumed too much of your divine power, how could I have gained the upper hand? Or do you want to say that if it wasn't for the fact that there was a divine will sealed in the epic and couldn't return to your body, your Tao wouldn't have existed? Only when it is complete will it fall into decline. Stark said nothing. What they said was what Stark wanted to say. Before attacking the new era, he had divided too much of his divine sense, which had consumed too much of his god force. Now, the god force in his godhead had dried up, and he couldn't summon any more god force. However, it had never used its divine power. Even if its divinity was broken, it still had a lot of divine power in reserve. As for divine sense, indeed, he did not retrieve a strand of his divine will. That strand of divine will was the one that Demon Emperor Dongwang had trapped. He was already manipulating that strand of divine sense to destroy the chessboard, but he still couldn't break free. That divine will contained his comprehension of the great Tao. If it did not return to his body, his great Tao would be flawed. They were both godly kings, but the slightest difference was the difference of 1,000 miles. How could he use a flawed great Tao to deal with their perfect great Tao? But this is fate, isn't it? You can't decide your fate. Give up. It laughed softly again, but this sentence was like a heavy hammer that fell on Stark's heart. Fate. Even if Stark didn't believe in fate, he had to admit that fate was playing tricks on people. At the beginning, the right time, place, and people were all on his side. Later, the right time, place, and people weren't on his side. It was the same when he fought with godly King Joy. Was he really not destined to become a godly emperor? If they continued fighting, he definitely wouldn't be their match. His divine power had already been exhausted, and that dim godhead was the best proof of that. However, he could not allow that to happen no matter what he said to hand over the godhood to them. Chapter 1832. It was better to die in glory than to live in dishonor. That was the path Stark was going to take now. The Outer Realm Protoss were born powerful. They had an affinity with the elements, and they could be regarded as celestials from birth. But the Creator would not be particularly fond of a certain race. For example, the dragon race had a strong physique that no other race could match. But the dragon race's reproductive ability was far inferior to that of other races. This was the Creator's balance. He would not make a certain race truly perfect. He would only make certain races approach perfection, thereby reflecting their higher level. The same was true for the Outer Realm Protoss. Some of them had talents that others looked up to, and some had a reproductive ability like humans. But they could not recover their divine power outside the Protoss territory. Just like Ultraman, when he ran out of energy, he had to return to the Protoss to recover his divine power. Otherwise, when they ran out of energy, they would be no different from ordinary mortals. Stark's divine spark was dim, which was caused by the exhaustion of his divine power. The Outer Realm, his divine power, could not be recovered, and he believed that the Creator would definitely not let him leave this place. Since that was the case, rather than letting his divine power run out, he would let the Creator's evil plan succeed. He might as well take advantage of the fact that he could still control his divine spark, self-destruction. You want to extend your life with my divine spark. As he spoke, faint cracks had already appeared on the Freedom God's divine spark. Due to the appearance of this crack, his already dim divine spark actually glowed a little more. Of course, it was still a gloomy light. Like a withered maple leaf, it revealed the color of despair. Do you have to be so cruel to yourself? How could the Creator not see through Stark's actions? As soon as the cracks appeared on his divine spark, he knew what Stark wanted to do. Yet, he did not show any signs of panic. This inevitably made people somewhat suspicious. If he had known earlier, his divine spark would have broken long ago. When the divine power in the divine spark completely dissipated, his divine spark would fall apart like a broken mirror. The moment his divine spark broke, his life would be forever separated from this world. Even his soul would not be able to survive. The only thing that could save him was Stark's divine spark. I'm going to die either way. I can't decide whether I live or die, but can I decide how I die? Stark shouted softly. At this moment, he was too lazy to roar. The outcome had already been decided, and he was more willing to spend the remaining time in peace. I can't be bothered to get angry with them anymore. He would die if his divine spark exploded, and they would also die if they couldn't get their divine spark. If they couldn't fulfill their dream of becoming the divine emperor, they wouldn't be able to dream about it either. Well said. In the void, it clapped gently. At this time, it was less than a kilometer away from Stark. To them, God Kings, this kind of distance could be traversed in an instant. But he still stood there quietly and didn't stop him, allowing Stark to activate the power of his divine spark and self-destruct. Gradually, Stark felt a little anxious. Yes, scorching. He was a little uneasy with his mother's calmness and began to be paranoid. His mind was completely tense. Why'd he stop her? Stark kept questioning himself in his heart, and his eyes were fixed on it, not missing any subtle changes in its expression and body movements. Did he really have no intention of stopping them? How could this be? Could it be that he didn't want the godhead? That was absolutely impossible. It had to need this godhood to extend its life. If it didn't need it, then it wouldn't have to do the series of things that followed. Suddenly, Stark's heart skipped a beat. A confident smile lingered at the corner of his mouth. He had almost fallen for his mother's mind attack. I don't know if I should say that you're calm, or that you're skilled and bold. Stark deliberately addressed it as sir, with a smile on his lips. You want to use this method to confuse me and make a mistake in my defense, so that you can take advantage of my absent-mindedness and snatch the divine spark into your hands. Really? Not a bad plan, but I'm sorry I saw through all of this. It was speechless. However, there was a subtle change in its expression, which was noticed by Stark. I was right. Looking at your current mood, you should be very anxious, wondering why the mind attack didn't work. How are you going to take the godhood from me now? Stark smiled confidently. He was now sure that his thoughts were correct. Although it wouldn't be long before he died from the self-detonation of the godhood, as long as he thought that its mother was going to leave this world with him, he would feel satisfied. At least, he hadn't lost completely. It wasn't a winner either. That's a wonderful reasoning. I want to applaud you. Unexpectedly, it clapped its hands lightly again. It looked at Stark, who was smiling confidently, with an appreciative gaze. Confidence is a good thing, but conceit sometimes harms you. After a long time, it said this. It's useless, it's mother. Do you think it's necessary to still be stubborn at a time like this? Why don't you try to snatch it now? Maybe it's even possible. Stark sneered playfully. As soon as he finished speaking, its mother actually swept in his direction. Stark, who had been paying attention to him, suddenly saw the cracks in its godhood expand. I lost, and you didn't win. Its mother, let's die together. Little did it know, it only moved a few meters forward and then didn't move forward again. Stark, who was laughing wildly, suddenly stopped laughing. How could it be? Why did he stop? Was he really not interested in his godhood? He didn't need his godhood to extend his life? That was impossible. Stark, who had already triggered the godhood to self-destruct, could no longer stop it. He stared straight at it. At this moment, its mother not only had no intention of fighting for it, it also set up a defensive barrier around it. Stark stretched out his hand and pointed at it. Due to the self-destruction of the self-directed godhood, cracks appeared on his body. Golden blood flowed out from the cracks, and her mother spread her hands innocently at him at this time. What's wrong with me? Do you have anything else to say? Then you have to be quick. The self-destruction of the godhood doesn't last long. Hurry up and tell me what last wishes you have. Maybe I can help you fulfill them out of kindness. You don't need my godhood? Stark finally said what was on the tip of his tongue, and its answer made it impossible for him to calm down. Yes, I don't need it. Impossible. Stark roared. You'll die without the godhood. You can't. Of course I choose to die. Then, Stark saw that a complete divine spark had actually drilled out from between their brows.